Millionaire told his fiancée he was bankrupt to test her love. Her reaction left everyone shocked. What happened next was unbelievable. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Evelyn Jones stood by the tall windows of the public elementary school's main hallway, gazing at the bustling street outside. It was late afternoon, and the faint glow of a winter sun reflected off the glass towers of Manhattan. In that warm, fading light, her brown hair, neatly gathered into a loose bun, seemed to catch brief flickers of gold. At 34, Evelyn had built a life dedicated to her students, devoting nearly every ounce of her energy to supporting their growth. Still, there were moments when she yearned for something more, some spark she couldn't quite name. While she was gathering her materials for the next day's lesson, Rebecca Williams, an art teacher just a few years older, approached with a broad smile. "You're staying late again?" Rebecca asked, raising an eyebrow. Evelyn shrugged lightly. "There's always something, extra grading, or just a chance to tidy up the classroom." She sighed and leaned against the wall. "Besides, the kids depend on me. Some of them don't get much attention at home." Rebecca nodded. "I get that. But don't forget you have a life too. Maybe carve out a moment or two just for yourself." Before Evelyn could respond, her phone buzzed. The screen showed a text from Noah Pierce, her fiancé. A small smile lit her face. "Looking forward to tonight. Don't be late." She quickly typed back a response, tucking the phone into her pocket. To her mind, Noah was a mixture of contrasts. 43 years old, tall, and always impeccably dressed. He came from a wealthy background that felt like another world to Evelyn. Yet he had a quiet gentleness she found profoundly comforting, as though he had built a wall of success around himself only to keep out those who craved his money rather than his heart. Meeting Noah months ago, at a charity event organized to raise funds for the school, had opened her eyes to how genuine certain philanthropists could be. They had found easy conversation, both determined to make real changes in the lives of children. When Evelyn finally left the school, she caught the train heading south. The faces around her blurred into the city's anonymous crowd. She reflected on her day, a challenging math lesson that had gone better than expected, a lunch break spent discussing underfunded arts programs with Rebecca, and a short but meaningful talk with a 10-year-old student who struggled to read. These moments gave her purpose, though occasionally she felt overwhelmed by it all. That evening, Noah had arranged to meet her at a cozy Italian restaurant in Midtown. She arrived, checking her reflection in the glass door, making sure her hair and light makeup were in place. The hostess guided her to a corner table near a flickering candle. Noah was already there, scrolling through his phone. He looked up the instant he sensed her presence, a warm smile spreading across his face. "Evelyn," he said softly, standing to greet her with a gentle embrace. "Long day?" She nodded, letting out a breath. "Same challenges, different date on the calendar," she joked. Then, noticing the slight furrow in his brow, she asked, "Is everything all right? You seem preoccupied." He hesitated a moment. "I have a lot on my mind, some business issues, maybe a minor setback." He reached across the table to take her hand. "But I'd rather hear about your day first." Their conversation shifted easily to the everyday details of her work. The new student from abroad who struggled with English, the extracurricular reading program she was trying to expand, and the sense of triumph she felt whenever a child improved. Evelyn spoke passionately, her eyes shining with devotion to her craft. Noah listened attentively, yet, at intervals, his gaze drifted away, as though wrestling an unspoken worry. She gently squeezed his hand. "Are you sure everything's fine? We can talk about it." Clearing his throat, he nodded. "It's nothing that can't wait. I promise I'll fill you in when the time is right." Though Evelyn tried to conceal it, concern pricked at her. She trusted Noah and didn't want to pry if he wasn't ready to open up. But something about his demeanor felt off, like a man burdened by a secret. As they finished dinner and walked out onto the sidewalk, the chilly Manhattan air surrounded them. Evelyn slipped her arm through his. With a playful smile, she teased, "You know, it's not every day I get wined and dined by a millionaire. Thank you for this evening." Noah's eyes flickered with a trace of sadness before he answered, "I'm the lucky one. Every time we're together, I realize how genuine you are. I can't imagine my life without that sincerity." They paused at the curb, the noise of taxis and distant sirens filling the space. Evelyn felt a sudden rush of emotion, sensing that something significant lay just beyond the horizon. She tried to brush away the unease, choosing to trust that whatever troubled him, they would face it as a team. For now, she reveled in the warmth of his presence, content to believe that love could conquer even the unspoken fears lurking in the shadows of a Manhattan night. Evelyn woke before dawn, her mind returning to the hint of worry she had glimpsed in Noah's eyes the previous evening. The winter sky outside her small apartment window was still dark, with only the faintest promise of daybreak over the tall city skyline. She set about her morning routine, feeding her cat, Pepper, and brewing a cup of coffee strong enough to brace her for the hours ahead. Yet, a kernel of unease refused to fade. Once she arrived at the school, she quickly got drawn into the usual rhythm of teaching, organizing reading materials, greeting students with a smile, and guiding them through math problems. Even so, she caught herself pausing between classes, looking out into the hallway as though hoping Noah might appear with a reassuring explanation for his troubled expression. Around midday, Evelyn's phone buzzed. Seeing Noah's name on the screen, she felt relief. Stepping into a quiet corner, she answered in a hushed voice, "I'm so glad you called. I was thinking about you." On the other end, his tone was subdued. "I need to see you this afternoon." "Something happened?" Her heart clenched. "Of course. Are you okay?" He offered only a brief murmur of reassurance before ending the call. She returned to her classroom with a swirling mixture of apprehension and determination. When the school day ended, Evelyn made her way to a nearby cafe where they had agreed to meet. She found Noah already seated at a small table near the window, his hands wrapped around a cup of tea he didn't seem interested in drinking. Today, he wore a simple sweater, not his usual tailored suit. That alone stirred her concern. Noah prized his polished appearance. She slipped into the chair across from him, offering a tentative smile. "You sounded upset on the phone. What's going on?" Noah stared at his cup as if gathering courage. "I received news this morning that my primary investment portfolio was a sham. It appears I've been conned, and the funds I placed have effectively vanished." Her eyes widened, shock and empathy mingling. "Conned? Noah, that's awful. How much are we talking about?" He swallowed hard. "Almost everything." The words seemed to reverberate in the small cafe, making the bustling noise around them momentarily recede in Evelyn's mind. She reached for his hand. "I'm so sorry. Are you certain?" "Is there no way to recover any of it?" Noah shook his head slowly. "From the preliminary information, it appears the person behind the scheme has fled with the money. My legal team is investigating, but it's not looking good." Her heart pounded. Though she'd never cared about Noah's wealth, the drastic nature of what he described left her speechless. She noticed him watching her closely, as if gauging her reaction. Evelyn inhaled deeply, trying to remain steady. "I'm here for you. Whatever you need, we'll figure it out." He squeezed her hand in acknowledgement, the faintest glimmer of relief dancing across his features. "Evelyn, I hate that I might drag you down with me. When I asked you to marry me, I never imagined this." She leaned forward, her voice firm. "Money isn't why I fell in love with you, Noah. Don't ever think that." "I'm not going anywhere." His gaze dropped, a mixture of gratitude and guilt flickering in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, "but I still feel awful. My world just turned upside down." They spent the next hour discussing immediate steps, contacting lawyers, halting discretionary spending, and considering the possibility of selling his penthouse. Evelyn offered to postpone wedding plans if that would help ease the financial burden. Though tears threatened to surface, she held them back, focusing on practicalities to keep her composure. When they finally left the cafe, the sun had slipped behind the skyscrapers, leaving the streets in a cold twilight. Evelyn tried to offer a smile of reassurance. "We'll manage. You're not alone in this." Noah nodded, though his face remained drawn. He parted with a somber hug, promising to keep her updated on any news. As she made her way home, Evelyn thought about how fragile life's certainties could be. Her fiancé, once so confident in his position, now stood on the brink of a personal catastrophe. She felt no doubt that she would stand by him. She loved him too fiercely to abandon him in a crisis, but an unsettling question lurked in the depths of her mind. How could something like this have happened to a man as cautious and experienced as Noah Pierce? Despite her unwavering support, she couldn't banish the faint rumble of unease that resonated through her heart. Evelyn reminded herself that trust was their foundation. Yet, somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice cautioned her that trust could be tested in ways she could never have anticipated. In the days that followed Noah's shocking revelation, Evelyn found it difficult to quiet her anxious thoughts. While preparing her lesson plans, she would catch herself scribbling half-formed questions. Who orchestrated this fraud? Why target Noah's portfolio? Time and again, she forced herself to refocus, reminding herself that the immediate goal was to support him, not interrogate him. At the school, her colleague Rebecca picked up on her distracted state. During a brief break between classes, Rebecca approached Evelyn with a gentle look of concern. "Is everything okay? You seem preoccupied." Evelyn attempted a reassuring smile. "Noah's facing a significant financial setback. He lost a lot of money in some investment scheme. I'm just trying to help him figure things out." Rebecca pressed her lips together. "You sure you're up for this? That's no small problem. Maybe you should slow down and ask him hard questions. How did all that money just vanish?" Evelyn shrugged, her shoulders tense. "He's upset enough as it is. I don't want to come off as unsupportive. Besides, I know Noah. He wouldn't lie about something like this. He's never given me a reason to doubt him." Yet, later that day, as Evelyn tried to grade papers in an empty classroom, the echo of Rebecca's skepticism lingered in her mind. She trusted Noah, but she also recognized that people under stress sometimes conceal details, whether out of shame or fear. Returning home, Evelyn brewed a pot of tea and tried to relax. Her cozy apartment, with its mismatched rugs and gently flickering floor lamp, felt like a sanctuary compared to the glimmering towers where Noah resided. Glancing around, she took comfort in the simple warmth of her surroundings. Nothing grand or luxurious, yet everything was authentically hers. That evening, Noah called, asking if he could come over. She welcomed him in, noticing his disheveled hair and the dark circles under his eyes as he sank onto her couch. "I've been in meetings all day," he muttered. "There's still no good news. My legal team is chasing leads, but it's looking more and more like the money is gone." Evelyn sat beside him, resting a hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry. If there's anything I can do, just say the word." He exhaled, lifting his gaze to meet hers. "I'm so grateful for you, but, to be honest, I'm worried about dragging you down." If I'm forced to sell the penthouse, if I have to let go of employees, I don't want you to feel any pressure to—" She placed a finger over his lips softly. "Stop. I'm here because I love you, not your bank account. Money changes, people lose jobs, fortunes come and go. But love, that's what counts, right?" His eyes moistened, though he quickly looked away. "I wish I had your faith," he said quietly. "I've seen how money can twist people's intentions. You're the exception, someone who sees me for who I really am." Evelyn couldn't help but notice an edge of desperation in his voice. She recalled the time they first met at the charity gala, how he had confessed his distrust toward those who seemed more interested in his wealth than his causes. Back then, she had admired his honesty, never imagining his insecurities would run so deep. As the night wore on, they spoke about restructuring his finances, the possibility of him downsizing, and the uncertain timeline for any potential legal remedies. Noah repeatedly apologized, which puzzled her. It wasn't as if he'd deliberately lost the money. At one point, she gently took his hand. "I don't blame you for this, you weren't reckless or irresponsible." "You're a victim of a crime, right?" He nodded, though his eyes flickered with the slightest hint of guilt. "Yes, of course, but it's complicated," he said. "I've always been so careful with my investments. That's what makes this particularly painful." She squeezed his hand, wanting to ease whatever burden he carried. "We'll get through it," she assured him, standing to fetch the pot of tea. Yet in that moment, a question formed in her mind. Why did this situation feel so different from other financial mishaps? Had she overlooked some important detail? Noah left soon after, embracing her like a man holding onto his last lifeline. Once alone, Evelyn tidied her living room, her thoughts heavy with unspoken doubts. She reminded herself she'd promised to trust him, to be his partner in adversity. Still, in the quiet hush of midnight, she couldn't entirely dismiss the growing suspicion that something about Noah's tale didn't quite add up. A few days later, Evelyn stood outside the principal's office at the school, waiting to discuss the budget for extracurricular activities. The corridor buzzed with students hurrying to class. Posters promoting art workshops and math club meetings clung to the walls, bright reminders of Evelyn's commitment to helping her pupils flourish in every way possible. Inside, Principal Turner sat behind a broad wooden desk, flipping through a stack of documents. She greeted Evelyn with a curt nod. "I understand you want to start a new after-school reading program. Our funds are stretched, but perhaps we can allocate something minimal." Evelyn's face lit up, momentarily forgetting her personal troubles. She outlined her plan enthusiastically. The program wouldn't require much, just some new books and a bit of teacher overtime. In the long run, it could be a game changer for students who need extra support. Principal Turner tapped her pen on the desk. "We can try a pilot program. I'll need a detailed proposal by the end of the week." Exiting the office, Evelyn let out a breath of relief. Even a modest budget would help. She was determined to keep focusing on her students, to remain anchored in the work that gave her purpose. But her mind drifted again to Noah. Since he'd shared the news of his sudden financial ruin, she had felt torn between her responsibilities at school and her duty to comfort him. That evening, Noah invited Evelyn over to his penthouse for what he called a serious conversation. She arrived to find the usually pristine living room cluttered with half-packed boxes and scattered papers. The large windows offered a sweeping view of Manhattan's glistening skyline, but the atmosphere inside was tense. "I'm selling the penthouse," Noah announced, gesturing around the space with forced nonchalance. "It's too expensive to maintain, and I need the cash to handle my debts while the legal team keeps searching for the missing funds." Evelyn glanced at the boxes. "It makes sense. It's just a place. You can always find somewhere smaller." He nodded, Yet his jaw tightened. I've never had to do something like this before. Part of me feels ashamed. She reached out to touch his arm. Don't. You're making a responsible choice. For a moment, his eyes softened. Then he cleared his throat, as if battling a rising wave of emotion. Thank you for saying that. Actually, there's another thing. I've been thinking we should scale back the wedding plans too. Maybe even postpone. Her heart twitched. Although she had never insisted on a grand ceremony, she knew how much it meant for them to celebrate their union in front of loved ones. If that's what you need to do, I understand, she replied gently. Noah looked down, his voice low. It's not that I don't want to marry you, I do. I just can't offer you the kind of wedding you deserve, not anymore. She gave a sad smile, stepping closer. I never wanted the huge affair anyway. The only thing I truly care about is being with you. We can have a smaller wedding if that makes you feel better. Or wait, if that's truly what you think is best. Despite her reassurance, Evelyn felt the sting of disappointment. She had begun to imagine that day, her simple but elegant dress, the genuine joy of close friends and family. Now, those dreams swayed under the weight of Noah's financial collapse. Still, if this was the sacrifice required to stand by him, she would do it. As they continued discussing the logistics, deposits already paid, vendors who might be willing to refund, the friction between them grew palpable. Noah seemed distant, repeatedly checking his phone for messages, responding vaguely to her questions. Each time she tried to offer comfort, he deflected, almost as if he were afraid to accept her love without reservations. At one point, she gently asked, "Is there anything else you're not telling me?" He froze, then forced a reassuring smile that didn't quite meet his eyes. "No, nothing else. I'm just stressed, Evelyn. Please be patient with me." She nodded slowly, pushing aside the gnawing suspicion in her chest. "I will, but remember, we're partners in this. You don't have to shoulder it alone." Later, when she returned to her own modest apartment, she stood by the window with Pepper the cat purring at her feet. She gazed out at the city's neon glow, an uneasy feeling inching up her spine. On one hand, she was resolved to endure whatever came, believing wholeheartedly in Noah's goodness. On the other, a flicker of doubt persisted. Why did she feel as though he was testing her at every turn, waiting to see if she might crack under the pressure? Sleep did not come easily that night. Evelyn tossed and turned, struggling with a new conflict. She longed to lift Noah's burdens, yet she also yearned for the honest intimacy she believed they had shared. If that intimacy was genuine, why did she sense he was still hiding something crucial beneath the surface? Early Saturday morning, Evelyn woke to an unexpected determination. She had spent the night wrestling with swirling anxieties, but somehow daylight brought clarity. She wasn't about to run from Noah's problems or her own fears. If building a life together meant weathering storms, then she would stand in the rain alongside him. She spent her morning making phone calls, first to the venue where they had tentatively booked a wedding date, then to a catering service recommended by one of Noah's associates. Each conversation was surprisingly smooth. Both parties were willing to grant partial refunds, especially given the circumstances. Evelyn's heart felt lighter. At least the financial burden of cancelling a grand ceremony wouldn't add salt to Noah's wounds. Later, she prepared a simple lunch of grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup at her apartment. She had invited Noah over to share the meal, deciding a home-cooked approach might soothe both their nerves. By the time he arrived, she sensed he was bracing himself for bad news. His shoulders were rigid, and his dark eyes carried that familiar tension. "I called the wedding venue," she began, leading him to the kitchen table where two steaming bowls awaited. We can reduce our deposit if we officially downsize or even postpone. So there's a bit of relief on that front. Noah exhaled, setting his jacket on the back of a chair. Thank you for handling that. Honestly, I was dreading the idea of having to cancel everything myself. He ran a hand through his hair, looking momentarily exhausted. Evelyn offered a small, understanding smile. I think, deep down, I wanted something more intimate anyway. A huge gala never felt like us. He nodded, though guilt shadowed his features. Still, I'm sorry. I know you deserve... She held up a hand gently. I don't need lavish details, Noah. I just need you. If it's a smaller gathering or even if we decide to wait, I'm at peace with that. A warm gratitude flickered in his eyes. Over lunch, they spoke about mundane things. Evelyn's hopes for the new reading program, the progress of the lawsuit Noah's legal team was pursuing, and whether he might move into a more modest place in the coming months. At times, they even shared a soft laugh, recalling a funny anecdote from their first date. Yet, beneath this veneer of calm cooperation, tension simmered. Evelyn occasionally caught Noah lost in thought, staring into his soup as though haunted by an inner conflict. She did her best to ignore it, hoping he would eventually open up about whatever still troubled him. After lunch, they settled on her small couch, Pepper hopping up to nestle between them. Evelyn stroked the cat's back, feeling a sense of normalcy, if only fleeting. She turned to Noah, choosing her words carefully. You know, I'm willing to sacrifice a lot for us to make this work. I'm selling my car next week. It's old, but I'll get some money for it. I can put that towards any immediate expenses you have. His eyes widened in alarm. Evelyn, no, that's your car, your independence. She offered a gentle shrug. Public transport is decent here, and I don't need the car all the time. We can manage. He took her hand, pressing it against his chest. That's incredibly generous, but it also makes me feel worse for dragging you into this mess. She leaned her head on his shoulder. We're in it together. I don't see it as dragging. For a moment, he relaxed, resting his chin on her hair. Evelyn closed her eyes, savoring the closeness, but the moment passed too quickly. Noah stood up, glancing at his watch. I should go. There's a meeting with my accountants I need to prepare for. Evelyn walked him to the door, her hand lingering in his for a moment. Let me know how it goes, she said, her voice gentle but firm. I want to be updated. No more surprises. He nodded, though she noted his hesitation. After he left, she felt that familiar pang of worry settle in. She had chosen her path, support him despite the looming uncertainty. But as she closed the door, a shard of doubt pricked at her thoughts. If he was truly facing a devastating loss, why did it feel as though he was reading from a script, testing her reactions at every turn? Standing alone in her small foyer, Evelyn reminded herself of the promise she had made, to be steadfast, to weather the storm side by side with Noah. Perhaps she was overthinking, letting insecurities cloud her judgment. Yet a quiet voice inside her whispered that she was crossing a threshold, a point of no return. She had decided to put faith in love, but the question now was whether that love was grounded in mutual honesty or built on an illusion that might unravel any day. Evelyn's weekend began in a blur of emotional exhaustion. She had barely recovered from the tension of deciding to sell her car to support Noah when her phone buzzed early Saturday morning. Expecting a text from him, she was surprised to see the name Oliver McCarthy. She remembered Noah mentioning Oliver a couple of times, an old friend, a lawyer, and someone Noah trusted implicitly. Wondering what he might want, Evelyn answered in a tentative voice. "Good morning, Evelyn," Oliver said, his tone polite but purposeful. "I hope I'm not intruding. Noah gave me your number. I'd like to meet and offer some guidance. both legal and personal. This situation with the lost investments can be complicated. If we can chat over coffee, it might help you get a clearer picture." Evelyn agreed. Curiosity piqued. She had spent days feeling like a spectator to Noah's looming crisis, uncertain where she could step in. Perhaps Oliver could shed light on the legal aspect and give her a sense of direction. They settled on a small cafe in the West Village, an unassuming spot that Evelyn liked for its warm decor and quiet corners. She arrived first, taking a table near a window overlooking a lazy Saturday sidewalk scene, dog walkers, couples holding hands, and a smattering of tourists. Within minutes, Oliver strode in. He was around 50, tall and lean, with graying hair at his temples. A neatly pressed shirt and navy slacks gave him a professional but approachable air. "Evelyn," he said, extending his hand, "thank you for meeting me on short notice. I've known Noah a long time and, well, I sense he's under considerable strain." She nodded, gesturing for him to sit. Once they both had coffee, Oliver clasped his hands together on the table. "I'm sure Noah's told you about the fraudulent investment scheme. My firm is investigating, but it's a labyrinth. The culprit's done a thorough job disappearing, and the odds of getting the money back seem slim." The weight of his words sank in. "It's hard watching him lose something he worked so hard for," Evelyn said quietly. "But he's even more upset about the future. He keeps apologizing to me, even though this isn't his fault." Oliver's gaze flicked to the bustling street beyond the window. "Noah has some trust issues," he began carefully. "He's been burned in the past. People have taken advantage of his generosity or his status. I'm not trying to excuse his behavior. I'm just telling you so you understand why he might act distant or overly cautious." Evelyn felt a pang of recognition. "I've sensed that. He seems almost afraid that I'll abandon him now that he's financially vulnerable." Oliver leaned in, lowering his voice. "Exactly. And that's where you come in, Evelyn. I wanted to meet because I suspect you'll be key to helping him stay grounded. He respects your integrity, your dedication to your students. He knows you're not here for the money." She offered a soft smile, though a knot of tension gripped her stomach. "I just hope he trusts that enough not to shut me out. Lately, I feel like he's pushing me away, maybe out of shame." Oliver nodded sympathetically. "He's stuck in a cycle of regret and fear. But he's going to need you to keep him from making impulsive decisions." Pausing, he chose his next words carefully. "You should also be aware that sometimes, in cases like this, people start to second-guess everything. They might hide details, or even test loved ones unconsciously." A flicker of unease stirred in her. She recalled the sense that Noah's crisis wasn't entirely as it seemed. But Evelyn dismissed the thought, unwilling to believe Noah would lie about something so significant. They finished their coffee in a comfortable silence. Before parting, Oliver handed her a business card. "Call me if you need any clarification. I'm overseeing the legal side, so if you have questions, don't hesitate. And be patient with Noah. He's not handling this well, but he does love you." "That much is clear." Evelyn thanked him, feeling oddly relieved by the conversation. At least there was someone who understood the broader situation and cared enough to reach out. She slipped the card into her purse, thinking how surreal it was to be caught in legal battles and financial turmoil, worlds away from her daily life as a public school teacher. When she returned to her apartment, Evelyn felt a burst of renewed determination. Maybe she could help Noah navigate this, and hopefully strengthen their relationship in the process. With Oliver's words echoing in her mind, she dialed Noah's number. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey," he said, sounding tired. "Everything okay?" "I just had coffee with Oliver," she replied gently. "He explained some of the legal complexities, and he cares about you, Noah. We both do. Silence lingered on the line for a moment. Yeah, Noah murmured at last. He's a good man and a good friend. Listen, I'd like to see you tonight. Maybe we can talk through some of this. Relief washed over her. I'd like that, she said. I'll come by around 7. Ending the call, Evelyn glanced at Pepper, who dozed contentedly on the armchair. In many ways, she still felt out of her depth in this swirling mess of lawsuits and lost wealth. But Oliver's brief mentorship infused her with renewed purpose. If Noah was willing to let her in, perhaps they could find a path through the chaos together. That evening, Evelyn stepped out of a taxi in front of Noah's building. It was one of Manhattan's prestigious high-rises, complete with a uniformed doorman and marble lobby floors. She wasn't sure how long Noah would remain in his penthouse, given his plan to sell it. A twist of sadness hit her each time she thought of him giving up the place he'd called home for years. She rode the elevator to the top floor, her heart fluttering with a mix of anticipation and worry. Something in Oliver's quiet warning lingered in her mind. People react to loss and betrayal in unpredictable ways. Would Noah be open and calm tonight, or would he be withdrawn? When she rang the doorbell, Noah greeted her with a tired smile. "Come in," he said softly, stepping aside. He offered a glass of water before leading her to the spacious living room, where a few more boxes were packed and labeled. Evelyn noticed a couple of empty spots on the walls where fine art had once hung. It was as though the penthouse was already half departed, a shell of its former grandeur. They settled on the couch. Noah gestured at the stacked boxes. "The real estate agent thinks we can get a decent price if we sell quickly. I've started packing what I absolutely want to keep, but it's a big job." Evelyn's gaze wandered. "Do you know where you might go next?" He shrugged, rubbing his forehead. "Not yet. Maybe a smaller condo, or even renting for a while. I'm not exactly sure of my finances right now." "Oliver seems hopeful," she said gently. "He's confident they'll track down the criminal. You might recover at least some funds." Noah's mouth set in a tight line. "I appreciate his optimism, but you can't imagine how many people I've trusted have let me down. This scheme hurts more than just my wallet. It rips open old wounds." Evelyn recalled Oliver's explanation about Noah's past heartbreaks, how previous relationships had unraveled when money became an issue. She reached for his hand. "I'm sorry, but you have to trust me. Trust us enough to share what you're feeling." He squeezed her hand, though he looked away. "I know. It's just, sometimes I question if anyone can be trusted, even you." Then, seeing the hurt that flickered across her face, he added quickly, "Not because of anything you've done, it's my own baggage." She took a careful breath, fighting the tingle of resentment. "I get it, but please understand, no matter what we face, I'm here because I love you. I told Oliver the same thing." "Oliver," Noah murmured, eyes narrowing slightly. "So, he met with you?" "I didn't realize he'd reach out so quickly." She offered a small smile. "He wanted to help. He seemed concerned, and I appreciate that someone with his knowledge took the time to explain things." Noah nodded, a flicker of tension in his jaw. "He's a good friend, though sometimes he thinks he knows what's best for me more than I do." Sensing a shift in his mood, Evelyn decided to gently steer the conversation toward practical matters. "Have you found any potential buyers for this place?" He exhaled, leaning back against the couch cushions. "1 or 2. I'm waiting on offers. Meanwhile, I need to liquidate more assets. Paintings, vintage furniture. It all feels so final." A pang of sympathy struck Evelyn. Maybe think of it as a reset rather than an end, a chance to build a simpler, more meaningful life. He studied her face for a moment. "You really mean that, don't you?" "Yes," she replied softly. "I never wanted you for your penthouse or your millions. In fact, I've always found your philanthropic work more impressive than your net worth." He reached over and pulled her into a gentle hug. "Thank you. I wish I could go back and stop this entire nightmare from unfolding." She allowed herself to relax briefly in his arms. When she drew back, she looked around at the half-empty space. "We'll get through this. In the meantime, let's figure out the logistics. If you need my help sorting or packing, I'm free tomorrow." His lips curved into a faint smile. "I'd like that. I can handle the finances, but the actual packing feels overwhelming." As they stood to walk around, planning where to begin, Evelyn felt a small glimmer of hope. If they worked together, even just sorting possessions, maybe that would open the door to deeper conversations, bridging the gap his fears had created. While her heart still wrestled with a hint of suspicion over how this all came about, she suppressed it. They were cutting ties with the old life, forging something new. Later, as she left the penthouse, her phone buzzed with a message from Rebecca, checking in. Evelyn typed a quick reply, letting her friend know she was okay. Stepping into the crisp night air, she paused to glance at the building's facade. Much was changing, but perhaps in letting go, they'd find a more genuine form of happiness, one not rooted in wealth but in honesty. Monday came too soon, and Evelyn found herself juggling lesson plans, staff meetings, and the swirl of thoughts that had consumed her weekend. Her school sat on a busy Manhattan street, overshadowed by towering offices, but inside its aged brick walls lived the small universe of her students and colleagues. As the morning announcements ended, Evelyn hurried to her classroom, feeling both flustered and eager to find some steady ground amidst the chaos in her personal life. The day's subject was literature, and she introduced her fifth-grade class to a novel about perseverance. Watching the kids' eager eyes, she was reminded of her own determination. "It's all right to be afraid, but you can't let it stop you from trying." Those words from the novel's protagonist resonated with her current situation. During lunch, she slipped out for a quick sandwich at a nearby deli. Just as she settled at a small table, her phone vibrated. It was a message from Grace Thompson, a name she knew from a local non-profit dedicated to helping underprivileged students. They had crossed paths at a prior school event. "Evelyn, heard about your reading program, wondering if you need any extra resources or volunteers. Let's chat soon." Evelyn felt a spark of excitement. She had nearly forgotten about Grace's offer. With everything happening in her personal life, her reading program had taken a back seat. But as she tapped a reply, she realized how vital it was not to lose sight of what mattered to her professionally. Work was more than a job. It was her anchor, her steadying force. That afternoon between classes, she dialed Grace's number. They quickly arranged a meeting for the following week to brainstorm potential collaborations. Evelyn hung up, breathing a little easier. It felt good to plan something that wasn't overshadowed by finances or heartbreak. Yet, the sense of stepping into unknown territory remained. Late that evening, after grading a stack of papers, she took the train to Noah's penthouse. The place looked even more chaotic than before. Bubble wrap and cardboard boxes scattered across the hardwood floors. A row of paintings leaned against a wall, each bearing small color-coded stickers. Noah greeted her with a weary half-smile. "Sorry about the mess. The appraiser came by this morning, so I had to take everything off the walls." She slipped off her coat and joined him in the living room. "How did it go?" He shrugged. "Mixed results. Some items are worth a bit less than I hoped, but it's still money I can use to keep up with legal fees and living expenses until we see where the lawsuit goes." They spent the next hour sorting through bookshelves. Noah asked Evelyn to set aside a few favorite volumes to donate to local schools. Her heart warmed at the thought of children discovering new stories. A short while later, as they packed, an antique vase slipped from Noah's grip and shattered on the floor. He cursed under his breath, crouching to pick up the shards. She noticed his hands trembling, the stress evidently chipping away at his composure. "Careful," she murmured, kneeling beside him. "Let me help." He released a frustrated breath. "It's just a vase, but it's also everything feels like it's slipping away." Evelyn set her hand on his back. "You still have me, and we can build a new life, however that looks." Their eyes met, and for a moment she sensed real vulnerability in his gaze. "I know," he whispered, "but I keep asking myself, am I enough without all this?" Without thinking, she pulled him into a gentle hug. "Of course you are." She found herself fighting back tears. Struck by how raw his question sounded, they cleaned up the mess and continued packing in relative silence. After a while, exhaustion wore on them both. Evelyn ordered takeout, and they ate Chinese food straight from the containers, perched on a pair of stools in the kitchen. In a rare moment of calm, they talked about small joys, old memories, funny stories, the day they first met at a charity event. Still, beneath the laughter, Evelyn felt an undercurrent of tension. She sensed that her unwavering support was both comforting and troubling to Noah. He occasionally cast her sideways looks, as if searching her face for any sign of disloyalty or hidden motives. She wondered whether Oliver had been right. Maybe Noah was subconsciously pushing boundaries, testing how much she could endure. When the food was gone and the cartons tossed, Noah walked her to the door. His expression was earnest. "Thank you," he said, voice steady. "I don't say it enough, but I see how much you're giving up for me. I won't forget it." She kissed his cheek, then pressed her forehead against his. "You're worth it," she promised, ignoring the faint twinge of uncertainty that flared inside her. As she left, stepping into the hallway's hush, the light seemed harsher, the air colder. Evelyn paused to steady herself. She reminded her heart that she was prepared to walk this unknown path, no matter how tricky the terrain became. But as the elevator descended, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was only glimpsing the surface of the trials ahead. By midweek, Evelyn found herself increasingly torn between her commitments at school and her desire to support Noah. The reading program she hoped to launch hinged on fresh funding, and Grace Thompson's organization seemed like a promising ally. Each day, Evelyn juggled phone calls, emails, and after-school meetings, trying to rally resources for her students. On Wednesday afternoon, she invited Grace to tour the school, hoping a first-hand look would inspire more direct support. As they walked the hallways, Grace, an African-American woman in her mid-40s with a calm but commanding presence, listened intently to Evelyn's concerns about underfunded libraries and overcrowded classrooms. "We have so many kids who can barely afford pencils, let alone books," Evelyn explained, pausing in front of a bulletin board showcasing student artwork. "If we could provide a structured after-school reading program with volunteers, I truly believe their academic performance would rise." Grace ran her fingers over the colorful paintings pinned to the board. "It's heartbreaking how easily children can fall behind. I've spent years trying to bridge that gap in other neighborhoods. I'd be happy to direct some volunteers here, maybe even donate supplies." Evelyn's eyes lit up. "That would be incredible. I can't thank you enough." They agreed to finalize details soon, and as Grace prepared to leave, she asked casually, "So how's everything else in your life, Evelyn? You seem a bit tired." Evelyn hesitated, uncertain how much personal detail she wanted to reveal. "I'm engaged to a man who's going through a lot right now. Financial issues, potential legal action. It's been stressful." Grace gave a compassionate nod. "Hard times test our bonds, but I have a feeling you're stronger than you think." Those words echoed in Evelyn's mind the rest of the day. By early evening, she felt a renewed sense of purpose, both for her students and for her relationship with Noah. She hopped on a crowded bus to meet him at a low-key restaurant near his soon-to-be-sold penthouse. Inside the dimly lit bistro, she spotted Noah already seated at a corner table, looking distractedly at his phone. He glanced up, offering a tired smile when she slid into the chair opposite him. "You made it," he said, his tone warm but subdued. "I'm sorry for dragging you out like this again." Evelyn waved a dismissive hand. "Don't apologize. I was at school anyway, wrapping up 1,000 details. They ordered drinks and small plates to share. For a while, conversation drifted to the mundane. Noah mentioned the realtor's latest report, while Evelyn filled him in on the potential collaboration with Grace Thompson. "That's wonderful," he said, leaning in. "I remember you talking about how important that program is. Did I ever tell you how much I admire your dedication to these kids?" She smiled. "It's what keeps me going, especially when other parts of my life feel unstable. Speaking of which, any updates from your legal team?" Noah shook his head, eyes darkening. "They're still tracking the prime suspect, but this person is slippery. It's an international case now, so it's complicated. Meanwhile, I'm finalizing paperwork to list the penthouse." She reached for his hand under the table. "Let me know if there's anything you need help with." "I can—" He squeezed her fingers, interrupting gently. "I know you would, but there's only so much you can do." A pause hovered. "So, about postponing the wedding? We haven't really set a new date yet." Evelyn's heart tensed. "No, we haven't. With everything going on, I assumed we'd wait until you felt more stable." His voice dropped. "And if that never happens, what if I can't recover the money or the status I had? Will you—" Her grip on his hand tightened. "Stop. I'm not here for that. Yes, I'd love for you to find justice, but it's not a condition for our marriage." He closed his eyes, a flicker of relief crossing his face. Yet, Evelyn couldn't ignore the shadow of doubt behind his expression. Why can't he accept my support without question, she wondered. When the food arrived, she changed the subject, recalling for him some light-hearted incidents at school. Kids mixing up words, a student's amusing painting of city life. She even told him about how excited she was over Grace's potential involvement. Noah appeared genuinely pleased, but as the evening wore on, his mood shifted again. In a moment of subdued honesty, he admitted, "Sometimes I feel like I live in two worlds, one where I pretend everything's fine, and another where I'm panicking inside." Evelyn's heart clenched. "I wish you'd let me into that second world. You don't have to handle it alone." His eyes met hers, and for a heartbeat, she saw raw vulnerability. "I know. I'm trying." They finished the meal quietly. While exiting, Noah's phone buzzed with a message. He glanced at it and his jaw tightened. Evelyn fought the urge to ask what it was. A seed of concern gnawed at her, but she swallowed her questions. As they stepped onto the sidewalk, she looped her arm through his. The city lights glowed overhead, and a cool breeze drifted by. She didn't know if she was bridging the gap between his two worlds, but she hoped, at least, they could stand in that space together, if only for a moment. The weekend arrived, and with it came a break from the frantic pace of the school week. Evelyn found herself at a modest community center in Harlem, where Grace Thompson had invited her to a small gathering of volunteer mentors and local activists. Though her primary goal was to garner support for the after-school reading program, she sensed this was also an opportunity to step out of her own worries, if just for a few hours. As soon as she entered the hall, she was greeted by colorful banners depicting educational initiatives, health workshops, and job training events. Folded tables at the back held pamphlets and sign-up sheets. Amid the hum of conversation, she spotted Grace engaged in lively discussion with a group of volunteers. "Evelyn," Grace called out, beckoning her over. "Meet some of our core team. This is Jade, who coordinates after-school tutoring, and Marcus, who helps with our scholarship fund for high school seniors." Evelyn shook hands with each, grateful for the friendly atmosphere. She explained her own mission, an enriched reading curriculum for younger students to improve literacy rates. Jade's eyes lit up. "That's so needed. I've seen kids who are brilliant but lack the foundational reading skills to really thrive." Marcus nodded. "Count me in if you need donations. I've got a few contacts who might be interested in sponsoring books." Their enthusiasm buoyed Evelyn's spirits. For the first time in weeks, she felt she was swimming with the current rather than against it. They chatted about logistics, how many volunteers might be available, potential schedules, and ways to measure progress. By the end of the discussion, she had a handful of phone numbers and emails. Just as she was about to say goodbye, Grace drew her aside. "You know, we do more than just fundraise for education. We sometimes offer counseling or resources for folks going through tough personal situations. If you ever need that, don't hesitate." Evelyn appreciated the kindness, but gave a gentle smile. "Thank you, Grace. Right now, I'm okay, though life has been complicated lately." A flicker of empathy crossed Grace's face. "If that complication ever weighs you down too heavily, my door's open. Sometimes we need a safe space to unload our worries." Evelyn nodded, tucking the sentiment away for later. She walked out of the community center with a renewed sense of purpose. She had discovered a group of like-minded people, and for the first time in a while, her mind wasn't completely preoccupied with Noah's spiraling financial drama. That afternoon, with a bounce in her step, she headed to Noah's penthouse. She found him seated on the living room floor, surrounded by half-packed boxes and scribbled notes. He looked up as she approached. "Hey," he said, rubbing his eyes as though he'd been staring at paperwork for too long. "How'd the meeting go?" Evelyn recounted her experience in Harlem, her voice brimming with excitement. "They're really enthusiastic about the reading program. I might have enough volunteers to make it a proper initiative." He seemed genuinely pleased, a faint smile relaxing his features. "That's fantastic, Evelyn. I'm proud of you. Maybe once all this is behind me, I can support it as well. Financially, I mean." She gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "Your moral support is enough for now. By the way, how's the sale going?" Noah sighed, leaning back against a stack of boxes. "The realtor found a potential buyer, but it's still early. I've been trying to see if I can hang on to a few sentimental pieces, but I'm not sure if it makes sense. I'm so underwater financially." Her heart ached at his downcast expression. "Let me help. You must be exhausted." They spent the next 2 hours sorting items into categories: keep, sell, donate. The keep pile was small: photo albums, a worn leather journal, a few personal mementos. Everything else fell into a massive flux of uncertain fate. As they worked, conversation drifted to lighter topics: movies they wanted to watch once things calmed down, jokes about how Pepper might react to bigger living spaces if they ever had one again. The banter felt refreshing, a reminder that their bond extended beyond the gravity of the moment. Midway through, the doorbell rang. Oliver McCarthy stepped in with his usual composed air. He offered a polite greeting, then turned to Noah. "Any news from the legal side I should know about?" Noah shook his head. "No major updates, but I was about to message you. One of my accounts got flagged for unusual activity. Could you look into that?" Oliver nodded and then acknowledged Evelyn with a courteous smile. "I see you're tackling the packing. Glad you two are working together. Sometimes the biggest challenge in these crises isn't the paperwork, but the emotional toll." "I'm learning that," Evelyn admitted. She noticed Noah tense slightly, as if uncomfortable with Oliver's candid tone. But the moment passed quickly. After Oliver left, Evelyn and Noah returned to their boxes. At one point, Noah rested a hand on the journal he'd set aside. He caught her gaze. "I used to write in this daily," he said quietly. "Back when I believed I had to figure out the world on my own." Evelyn knelt beside him. "You don't have to do that anymore." He smiled, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes, and for that brief moment, the weight of betrayal and fear lifted. Evelyn could see a glimpse of the man she had fallen in love with, thoughtful, caring, and eager to do good. She prayed that in the midst of these uncertain times, they would find not only allies, but also a deeper sense of trust in each other. Perhaps that trust, once forged in adversity, would outlast any passing storm. Evelyn was in the school's staff lounge late one afternoon, sipping a lukewarm cup of tea while scrolling through class materials on her tablet. Outside, the winter light was dimming, casting the playground in a long, quiet shadow. Principal Turner's voice echoed from the hallway, directing a janitor about something or other. The hum of a vacuum cleaner rumbled in the distance. She was reviewing an email from Grace about the volunteer logistics when a new message popped up. Brooke Samuels. Evelyn frowned, trying to recall the name. Then it hit her. Brooke was a junior analyst at one of Noah's companies. They'd briefly met at a fundraising event months ago. Curious, Evelyn tapped to open the email. It was short and somewhat cryptic. "Hi, Evelyn. I hope you don't mind me reaching out. There's something about Noah's situation you might want to know. Could we talk in person sometime? It's delicate." "Best." Brooke Evelyn's pulse quickened. She felt a rush of both alarm and intrigue. Why contact her instead of speaking directly to Noah? And what did Brooke mean by something you might want to know? That evening, as she left the school building, she debated whether to mention the email to Noah, but he had already been so tightly wound, and she dreaded adding fuel to the fire of his stress. Instead, she decided to respond politely, asking Brooke for more information. Within minutes, Brooke replied with a request to meet for coffee the next day. By the time Evelyn arrived at Noah's penthouse that night, her nerves were on edge. She found him in the kitchen, opening a can of soup for a quick dinner. His entire demeanor looked strained, as if he hadn't slept well in days. "Evelyn," he greeted with a weary half-smile, "did you eat yet? There's enough soup here for two if you don't mind a simple meal." "Soup sounds good," she replied, setting her coat aside. "How was your day?" "Long," he muttered, stirring the pot absently. "I had back-to-back meetings with lawyers and accountants. I'm starting to think there's no light at the end of this tunnel." She moved closer, resting a hand on his back. "Let me help," she offered, reaching for bowls. "We can eat and decompress." As they sat down to dinner, conversation briefly flickered over small topics. Her students, the reading program, the boxes scattered around the penthouse. But the moment she considered telling him about Brooke's email, she felt her stomach knot. What if this is nothing, she reasoned. What if it only makes him more paranoid? Instead, she asked, "Any news on the penthouse sale?" Noah shook his head, blowing on a spoonful of soup. "The buyer keeps dragging their feet. Might be time to list it on a broader market. More showings, more questions." He sighed. "I just want it done." Evelyn noticed his frustration. She reached across the table, touching his wrist. "I'm proud of you for staying strong." His eyes flicked up to hers, gratitude battling with self-doubt. "I'm trying, but every day, I wonder if I've lost something I can't get back." She chose her next words carefully, remembering Grace's comment about needing safe spaces. "No matter what happens with your finances, you haven't lost you, and I'm right here." He didn't reply immediately, merely nodded, a faraway look crossing his face. After dinner, they tidied up, exchanging few words. She sensed he was mentally elsewhere, perhaps worrying about new developments or old wounds. When she prepared to leave, he walked her to the door. Thanks for coming. Even a quiet meal helps keep me sane, he said with a fragile smile. She hesitated, emotions swirling. I love you, Noah. Don't forget that, okay? He paused, nodding slowly. I won't, he whispered, though a glimmer of uncertainty clouded his eyes. Later, in the quiet sanctuary of her own apartment, Evelyn reread Brooke's email. Questions raced through her mind. Was this about the fraud? A clue that might help? Or something more unsettling? Her gut clenched at the possibility that the entire situation was more complex than she had assumed. Pepper the cat meowed, circling her ankles, but Evelyn was too lost in thought to offer more than an absent-minded pat. She tapped out a confirmation to Brooke, agreeing to meet the following afternoon at a cafe near downtown. Placing her phone aside, she tried to relax, but an uneasy feeling stole over her. Noah had shown no hint of preparing her for any shocking revelations, yet Brooke's message implied there was something to uncover. Could Noah be keeping more from me? The fear nibbled at her heart, a subtle dread she tried to push away with reason, but reason offered no solace. Lying in bed later, the city lights flickering through the blinds, she stared at the ceiling, wrestling with conflicting loyalties. She wanted to protect Noah, but she also needed to protect herself from secrets that could erode the very trust she had fought to preserve. And so, she drifted off to a restless sleep, the promise of tomorrow's meeting swirling in her dreams, signaling that her journey into deeper uncertainties was far from over. The following afternoon, Evelyn arrived at a small cafe on the Lower East Side, feeling a swirl of anticipation and dread. She spotted Brooke Samuels, seated near the window, a latte in front of her. Brooke, around 29, had short blonde hair and a poised, professional manner, traits that stood out even in casual surroundings. Evelyn took a breath to steady herself, then walked over. "Brooke?" "I'm Evelyn." Brooke stood and extended a hand. "Thanks for meeting with me. I'm sorry if I was vague in my message. It's just, this whole situation feels complicated." Evelyn slid into the chair opposite Brooke. "I appreciate you reaching out. Let's talk." Once they ordered coffee, Brooke leaned in, lowering her voice. "I've been working at Pierce Holdings for a while. Started as a junior analyst. Now I handle various corporate accounts. I know you're engaged to Noah, and I didn't want to overstep, but I felt it was important you hear something." She paused, stirring her drink. "I've heard rumors around the office that the company's finances are still solid. But the official story is that we're in crisis because of some fraudulent scheme. I've even seen figures that suggest we're actually doing quite well. It doesn't add up." Evelyn's chest tightened. "So, you're saying the fraud might not be real, or at least not on the scale Noah described?" Brooke shifted uncomfortably. "I don't want to accuse Mr. Pierce of anything. I respect him. But it's strange. I've compiled monthly statements, and they show healthy revenues. I'm not sure if that extends to his personal investments, but if the company's strong, how did he lose everything?" Evelyn felt her mind spin. She recalled the anxious nights, the boxes in the penthouse, the alleged forced downsizing. Could it all be an act? No, she told herself. That doesn't make sense. Why would he lie? Still, her heart pounded with doubt. "Have you tried talking to him or Oliver McCarthy?" Brooke shook her head. "Oliver's a top-notch lawyer, very protective of Mr. Pierce, and I'm just a mid-level employee. Plus, I didn't want them thinking I was prying." She exhaled slowly. "But when I ran into you that day, it seemed like you were in the dark about certain things. I realized you might want to know there's more to the story." Evelyn pressed her fingertips against her temple. She had come here hoping for a small clue that might confirm or deny her suspicions, but this only deepened the mystery. "Why do you think he'd pretend to be broke?" she asked softly. Brooke hesitated. It's possible he's hiding something. Maybe from competitors, maybe for personal reasons. I don't know the motive. But I just felt I should tell you to look a bit deeper before making any big decisions. They finished their coffee in silence, each absorbed in anxious thoughts. Eventually, Brooke stood, gathering her purse. I'm sorry if this complicates your life. I just couldn't stay quiet. Evelyn rose too, her nerves rattled. Thank you for telling me. I appreciate your honesty. They exchanged cautious smiles, then parted ways. Outside, the afternoon sun seemed too bright, and the city's hustle felt overwhelming. Evelyn's heart pounded as she walked aimlessly along the sidewalk, trying to reconcile Brooke's revelations with what she knew of Noah. Could he be staging this? The very idea felt absurd, yet she couldn't deny the creeping sense that pieces weren't lining up. In a daze, she called Rebecca, her friend and colleague at school. "Hey, do you have a minute?" she asked, voice taut. "Sure," Rebecca said. "You sound stressed." They found a bench in a small park near the cafe, and Evelyn relayed Brooke's words. Rebecca listened without interrupting, her face somber. "This is huge," she finally said. "You deserve an explanation." Evelyn stared at the ground. I love him so much, but if he's lying about something of this magnitude, what does that mean for our future? Maybe he's trying to protect me somehow. Or maybe he doesn't trust me. Rebecca touched Evelyn's arm gently. He's the only one who can give you answers, but tread carefully. If there's a good reason for his secrecy, you don't want to accuse him unfairly. If not, you'll need to know exactly what you're getting into before you marry him. Evelyn breathed in the crisp air, trying to steady her roiling emotions. She thought of Noah's anxious expressions, his constant apologies, the restless nights she suspected he endured. Could that be genuine guilt for deceiving me? The possibility left her heart aching. When they parted ways, Rebecca gave her a hug. "Keep me posted. I'm here for you, whatever happens." Evelyn managed a faint smile. "Thank you. I'll figure it out." But as she headed to the subway, a cold dread settled in. The last few weeks of chaos, were they born of genuine loss or a careful act? She thought of Oliver's warnings, of Noah's repeated references to past betrayals, and an unsettling possibility emerged. He might be testing my loyalty, my sincerity. The notion stung. She had always assumed her love was enough. But if Noah truly doubted her intentions, if he had orchestrated this entire fall from grace just to see how she'd react, she wasn't sure how she would ever forgive him. That night, Evelyn could hardly sleep. She tossed and turned, the conversation with Brooke replaying in her mind. Even Pepper the cat seemed unsettled, pacing restlessly around the apartment. Each time Evelyn closed her eyes, she pictured Noah's tormented expression, wondering how much of it was genuine heartbreak and how much was contrived. By morning, she felt physically exhausted, but no closer to clarity. After teaching her classes with a forced smile, she slipped into the faculty lounge, grateful for a short break. Rebecca was there, sipping tea. She patted the seat beside her. "Any decision on what you'll do?" Evelyn slumped into the chair. "Not yet. I can't just ambush him with accusations. I need proof. Besides, part of me wants to believe there's a reasonable explanation. Brooke's information might not show the whole picture." Rebecca understood but gently pressed. "Still, you can't let this fester forever." Evelyn nodded, her chest tight. "I know. It's just, if he's lying, what does that say about our relationship? And if he isn't, I risk damaging his trust by assuming the worst." She sighed, fiddling with a pen in her hands. "I'm stuck." After her shift ended, she decided to visit Noah unannounced. Maybe if I catch him off guard, I'll sense if he's hiding something. The thought made her feel uneasy, as if she were stooping to deceit herself. Yet she had no better plan. Arriving at the penthouse in late afternoon, she found the door slightly ajar. She called out, "Noah?" No response. A half-packed box tipped precariously near the entrance. The place was in more disarray than usual. She stepped inside cautiously, heart pounding. She followed faint voices to the home office, where she spotted Oliver and Noah in a heated exchange. Oliver was gesturing at a stack of papers on the desk, while Noah paced in agitation. Evelyn caught fragments of their conversation. "She's bound to find out if this continues," Oliver said, exasperated. "I can handle it," Noah snapped. "She won't." At that moment, Evelyn's presence must have registered. Both men turned, surprise etched on their faces. "Evelyn," Oliver said, voice carefully even, "we didn't hear you come in." Noah's face drained of color. You're early. I didn't expect—" She swallowed, stepping forward. "I know. I just needed to talk to you." "What's going on here?" Oliver cleared his throat. "I should give you two some privacy." He gathered his briefcase, casting Noah a look that was both stern and sympathetic, then brushed past Evelyn with a polite nod. Evelyn stared at Noah. "Why do I get the sense there's something you're not telling me?" Her voice trembled, a swirl of hurt and anger seizing her chest. He ran a hand through his hair. I can explain, Evelyn. It's just complicated." She folded her arms, recalling Brooke's words. "That's all you ever say, it's complicated." "But I've learned some things that don't match your story. People at your company claim the finances are fine. Why would they say that if you've really lost everything?" Noah opened his mouth, then closed it, looking cornered. "I can't talk about the company's internal details," he said at last, avoiding her gaze. "There are legal constraints. But you have to believe me when I say my personal finances, they're not what they used to be." Evelyn stepped closer, her voice quieter but edged with desperation. "I want to believe you, Noah. I love you, but I can't ignore the contradictions. Tell me the truth. Are you actually broke?" He seemed to wrestle with himself, eyes darting around the room. Finally, he took her hand, his fingers trembling. "Evelyn, I'm scared. You're the only person I truly trust, but my fear of being used, I can't shake it. People have deceived me for years because of my money. I needed to be absolutely sure that you—" She pulled her hand away, heart stinging. "That I'm not like them." He hesitated, and in the silence, Evelyn's voice quavered. "So you fabricated the entire thing? The lost fortune, the sale of your penthouse, all of it?" A wave of shame crossed his features, and her suspicion grew heavier. He didn't directly answer her question, which was answer enough. He only said, "I never wanted to hurt you. I just needed proof. Proof that this time, love was real." Tears blurred her vision. "You lied to me, put me through weeks of worry, just to test my loyalty. Noah, that's not how you build trust." He reached for her, but she took a step back, shaking her head. The realization sliced through her, both furious and heartbreakingly sad. All the puzzle pieces aligned, and the betrayal felt almost unbearable. She had sacrificed, poured her heart out, bent over backwards to support him. And for what? "I need some air," she said, voice trembling. I can't even look at you right now." Noah's expression crumpled with regret, but he didn't stop her as she turned and walked away. She snatched her coat by the door, ignoring the boxes and the half-finished illusions stacked around her, and hurried into the hallway. The pain in her chest felt overwhelming, as if the future she'd been clinging to was collapsing before her eyes. Evelyn fled the penthouse, her emotions spiraling. She took the elevator down in a haze, tears slipping free of the tight control she'd struggled to maintain. By the time she reached the busy street, her cheeks were wet and her mind was swirling with disbelief. This was all a test. How could he? She wandered aimlessly, ignoring the cold wind biting at her face. Fragments of memory flashed through her mind. Noah's haunted looks, his endless apologies, the guilt in his eyes every time she offered help. Of course he looked guilty. He was lying. She replayed every sacrifice she'd made, selling her car, postponing the wedding, even considering giving up more to stand by him. Anger roiled in her stomach, clashing with the heartbreak constricting her chest. Eventually, she called Rebecca, her fingers shaking so badly she nearly dropped the phone. Rebecca, can I come over?" she asked hoarsely. "Something happened." Within half an hour, Evelyn found herself on Rebecca's living room couch. Rebecca had handed her a warm mug of chamomile tea and sat beside her, wordlessly rubbing Evelyn's back in circles. Once Evelyn calmed enough to speak, she recounted the confrontation. Her voice cracked when she repeated the phrase, "He tested me." Rebecca's face hardened. "That's unbelievably cruel. I knew something was off, but I didn't think he'd orchestrate the entire thing to test you. Evelyn, I'm so sorry." Evelyn set the mug aside, burying her face in her hands. "I'm humiliated. I poured my heart out for him, gave up so much, only to discover he never trusted me in the first place." Rebecca pulled her into a comforting hug. "You did everything right on your end. None of this is your fault. He's the one who twisted your love into some weird experiment." The harsh truth of that statement sent another wave of tears coursing down Evelyn's cheeks. "What do I do now?" she whispered. "I love him. Or at least, I thought I did. But how do I forgive something like this?" Rebecca let out a pained sigh. "You need time, and you don't have to forgive him today, or at all, if you decide that it's a major betrayal, not just a small misunderstanding." They talked for hours, going in circles. By the time midnight approached, Evelyn felt completely drained. Rebecca insisted she stay the night in the guest room. Lying in a borrowed nightshirt, Evelyn stared at the ceiling, recollections swirling again. Noah's vulnerable confessions about being used, the feeling she'd had that he was sincere, only to find out he'd orchestrated it. Eventually, exhaustion won, and she slipped into a restless sleep. The next morning, she woke to gentle sunlight filtering through the curtains. Her first coherent thought was, it wasn't a bad dream. Noah really did that. The realization stole her breath. Downstairs, Rebecca had made breakfast, but Evelyn could only nibble at toast. She felt numb, as though a part of her had been severed. Rebecca settled across from her at the table. "What's your plan? Do you want to confront him again? Or do you need space?" Evelyn bit her lip, eyes distant. "I don't know. Part of me wants answers, like why he'd go to such extremes. But I'm so angry and hurt, I'm not sure if I can handle seeing him." She gave a watery laugh. "You know, I actually worried I might betray him by doubting his story, and the whole time it was reversed." Rebecca reached over to squeeze her hand. "Take the day off if you need. I'm sure the school would understand." Evelyn considered it but shook her head. "No, I have my students. They're counting on me. Besides, focusing on them might keep me from drowning in this mess." After a brief shower and a borrowed sweater from Rebecca, Evelyn headed to work. Entering the classroom, she forced herself to greet the kids with a smile. They didn't notice the strain behind her eyes, nor did they sense the heartbreak crackling beneath her calm exterior. Teaching fractions and spelling seemed almost trivial compared to the devastation in her personal life, yet it was also a lifeline. For those few hours, she could focus on something productive and meaningful. But as lunchtime arrived, her phone buzzed. A text from Noah, "Please let me explain. I'm sorry. Can we meet?" She stared at the screen, feeling a surge of resentment. Explain? He already admitted the biggest piece. I was a guinea pig in his twisted test. What's left to say? She locked her phone without responding, tears threatening to well up again. Her students were due back from recess in moments, and she refused to let them see their teacher unravel. Taking a deep breath, she collected her composure. The day crawled by. She made it through, but the final bell felt like a mercy. Upon returning to her apartment that evening, she found a note tucked under her door. Noah's handwriting. "I'm so sorry. I'll do anything to fix this. Please give me a chance." Evelyn ripped it off the floor, her hands trembling. She sank onto the couch, reading it twice. But no matter how many times she scanned his words, her anger and betrayal didn't waver. The truth was undeniable. He had lied and manipulated her heart to sate his insecurities, and as far as she could tell, that might be something she could never truly forgive. For the next few days, Evelyn ignored Noah's calls and texts, throwing herself into her job. She organized a mini-book drive with Grace Thompson's team, collecting novels and dictionaries for the upcoming reading program. Her students, thrilled by the chance to earn new books, helped distribute flyers in the neighborhood. It was a flurry of purpose that momentarily kept her heartbreak at bay. One afternoon, however, Oliver McCarthy appeared unannounced at the school. Evelyn was packing up her materials, preparing to leave, when the principal announced a visitor in the lobby. Oliver stood there in a neat overcoat, looking apologetic. "Evelyn," he began softly, "I'm sorry for intruding. I've been trying to reach you on Noah's behalf, but it seems you changed your number or blocked ours." Her cheeks warmed. She had, in fact, blocked Noah's line out of sheer frustration. "I didn't block you, but maybe it's the same account. Anyway, what do you want, Oliver?" He cleared his throat. "To talk, privately, if that's possible." Reluctantly, she led him to a small conference room off the main hallway. Inside, she folded her arms, bracing herself. "I don't want to hear any excuses, Oliver. You were part of this lie." Oliver exhaled, setting his briefcase on a table. "Yes, I knew pieces of it. I advised him against taking it so far, but Noah's been my friend for decades." He was insistent. He looked down, regret evident. "I never intended to hurt you. I could see you were genuine, which is exactly why I warned Noah this was a terrible idea." Evelyn felt her throat tighten. "Then why didn't you warn me?" He grimaced. "Loyalty, I suppose. I owed my allegiance to Noah, but now, seeing how it's affected you both, I realize I should have stepped in differently." He hesitated, then opened his briefcase. "Noah asked me to deliver this letter. He wrote it himself, and he hopes you'll read it." She eyed the envelope warily, then took it with trembling fingers. "What does he expect?" "My forgiveness." Oliver's expression was gentle. "He's hoping for a chance to explain his reasoning more fully. It doesn't justify what he did, but maybe it'll help you make a decision." He paused. "He's in agony, Evelyn. I know that doesn't solve anything, but I see how deeply he cares for you." Tears threatened to surface. She clenched her jaw, fighting them back. "He should be. He broke my trust. That's not something you patch up with a few words." "I understand," Oliver said quietly. "Look, I'll leave you to it, but if you ever need to talk, or if there's any help I can provide." He withdrew a business card and placed it on the table. "I'm truly sorry, Evelyn." She gave a short nod, and Oliver left without pressing further. Staring at the envelope in her hands, she felt torn. Part of her wanted to rip it up on the spot. Another part, the one that remembered falling in love with Noah's kindness, yearned to know why. Later that evening, after a long conversation with Rebecca, who was firmly in the "you owe him nothing" camp, Evelyn decided to read the letter. She sat at her small kitchen table, Pepper curled at her feet, and carefully tore open the envelope. The letter was lengthy, handwritten in a neat script. Noah acknowledged that his plan had been born from deep-seated insecurities. He wrote about 2 previous engagements that had ended abruptly when the women realized he wouldn't fund their extravagant whims indefinitely. He described years of feeling like an ATM rather than a person, leading him to trust almost no one. When he met Evelyn, he claimed he was so overwhelmed by her genuineness that he feared it might be too good to be true. He ended with an apology, admitting he'd handled everything horribly, and expressed a willingness to do anything, therapy, open discussion, surrendering financial control, if it meant rebuilding her trust. By the time she finished reading, Evelyn's anger still burned, but beneath it lay a spark of empathy. She couldn't deny that he'd been scarred by past experiences, yet was that an excuse for deceiving her so profoundly? She set the letter aside and buried her face in her hands. Do I even want to try to fix this? Noah had trampled her feelings, but she also recalled their genuine connection, his involvement in her school's charity, his unwavering attention when she talked about her students, the tenderness in his eyes when he said her name. A fragile seed of possibility stirred. Maybe they could talk, not to rush back into his arms, but to see if there was a path forward. She could not promise forgiveness, but perhaps a conversation was due. She texted him, her heart pounding. I read your letter. I'm not making any promises, but we can meet. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. at the cafe on West 73rd. The reply came quickly. Thank you. I'll be there. Tears glistened in her eyes as she set her phone down. She wasn't sure if she could ever truly forgive him. But at least she'd hear him out. A fragile step toward understanding, if only to lay their shared ghosts to rest. Evelyn arrived at the cafe on West 73rd just before 7, her stomach twisted in nervous knots. The place was modest, with warm lighting and a scattering of small tables. She remembered coming here a few times after school, drawn by the quiet atmosphere and the comforting smell of fresh pastries. Tonight, however, it felt charged with tension. Noah was already there, seated in a corner booth. He stood up when he saw her, hesitated as if unsure whether to reach for a hug or remain at a distance, then settled on giving her a nod. Thank you for meeting me, he said softly, his voice tinged with relief and regret. She slid into the seat opposite him, folding her hands together on the table. I'm not sure how this goes, she admitted, but I read your letter. I want to talk. He inclined his head, taking a deep breath. I'm grateful, and I understand if you're still angry. I deserve it. They ordered coffee to buy a moment of calm, neither making eye contact as the server approached. When the server left, Noah turned to Evelyn, eyes full of contrition. Where do we start? Evelyn met his gaze, fighting to keep her voice steady. Why don't you tell me exactly how this test began? He clasped his hands. You know about my past. 2 engagements that ended badly. After the second one, I vowed never to let anyone exploit me again. When I met you and realized how different you seemed, I was terrified that, in time, you might change. Or that I'd discover you had hidden motives like the others. He looked down, shame evident. So, I concocted this plan to see if you would still stand by me if I lost everything. I told Oliver. He warned me it was foolish, but my fear took over. She tensed. Your fear doesn't excuse the magnitude of this lie. Do you realize how humiliating it was for me to watch you pretend to be broke? To watch me scramble to help? Her throat constricted, recalling the heartbreak. I sold my car, Noah. I was ready to give up our wedding plans. Do you see how hurtful that is? His eyes glistened. Yes, and I hate myself for letting it go so far. Once I saw how genuine you were, I wanted to come clean, but each day I hesitated. I felt trapped by my own lie. I was afraid you'd leave me once you discovered I'd deceived you. She scoffed bitterly. So you extended the deception, which made everything worse. He nodded, looking utterly miserable. I understand how backward it is. In the end, I did to you exactly what I feared others would do to me, used you for my own ends." Their coffees arrived, providing a momentary distraction. Evelyn sipped hers, trying to steady her trembling hands. "You destroyed my trust in you. How can I believe a single word you say now?" Noah exhaled unsteadily. "I'm willing to do anything to show you this was a one-time act of stupidity, therapy, couples counseling, letting you see all my financial records. You name it. I don't want to lose you, Evelyn." She studied his face, searching for sincerity. "I did love you," she said quietly. "I'm just not sure if the man I loved really exists, or if he was another facade." A tear slipped down his cheek. "He exists, and he's a fool who just realized how precious your faith in him was and how thoughtless he was to break it." Silence weighed heavily between them. Outside, traffic hummed by. Inside, the warm light cast shadows on the table between them, reflecting the emotional distance they still had to bridge. Evelyn finally spoke. "I can't promise forgiveness. I need time to process this. All I can offer right now is that I won't cut you off entirely. I'll consider whether there's a path to rebuild what we had." Noah nodded, voice choking with gratitude. "Thank you. That's more than I deserve." They continued talking for nearly an hour, candidly, painfully. Noah described the shame he felt each time Evelyn went out of her way to support him, how he alternated between gratitude and guilt. Evelyn shared how his deception shattered her sense of stability, how blindsided she felt. By the end, they reached no resolution, but the raw honesty was a start. As they stood to leave, Noah gently asked, "May I walk you home, or would you prefer I keep my distance?" Evelyn hesitated, then shook her head. "I need some space tonight. Let me think." He accepted that without argument, offering a meek goodbye. She watched him exit the cafe, shoulders slumped, before she stepped out into the crisp evening air herself. Walking alone, she felt hollow. "We've confronted the truth," she thought. "So why do I feel like there's an even bigger battle ahead? The lies had been exposed, but the wounds they caused might fester unless carefully tended. Rebuilding trust, even if she chose that path, wouldn't be easy. Indeed, she sensed that this confrontation was only the beginning. She wasn't merely facing Noah's betrayal, she was facing the challenge of deciding what she wanted for her future. Whether to cling to a man who had lied out of fear or to break away for the sake of her own dignity. The question loomed, and she carried it with her through the quiet streets, bracing herself for whatever trials still lay ahead. Evelyn's first impulse was to avoid seeing Noah altogether. But life seldom granted easy paths, and mere days after their tense meeting at the cafe, a glaring reminder of how intertwined their lives were landed on her doorstep. A silver-edged envelope arrived, bearing the insignia of a prestigious philanthropic organization. Within she found an invitation to the upcoming benefit dinner, a high-profile event where wealthy patrons contributed to New York's public schools. Originally, she and Noah were to attend as an engaged couple, highlighting their shared devotion to education. Now, the very thought of public appearances with Noah made her stomach clench. But refusing the invitation outright would mean turning her back on the causes she cared about, particularly the new reading program with Grace Thompson's organization, which stood to receive crucial support at this event. Torn between personal betrayal and professional conviction, Evelyn spent a long night deliberating before deciding to go. She couldn't let her students and colleagues down. By early evening on the night of the benefit, Evelyn stood before her bedroom mirror, her heart pounding. She'd chosen a simple navy dress, modest but elegant. Her hair was swept back, revealing the uncertain expression in her eyes. For a moment, She recalled how she once dreamed of arriving at such galas on Noah's arm, proud to share her passion for education with influential donors. Now, that dream felt tainted by deceit. Still, as she slipped on a pair of low heels, she clung to the thought that her students' needs outweighed her personal crisis. "I'm doing this for them," she told herself, swallowing the knot in her throat. "I can handle facing him in public." At the entrance to the grand ballroom, Evelyn was greeted by swirling chatter and the gentle strains of a string quartet. Elegant decorations draped the space in warm light, and clusters of guests, business tycoons, celebrities, philanthropic leaders, mingled around tall cocktail tables. A few recognized her from previous school fundraisers, offering polite nods or quick remarks about her reading program. She spotted Grace Thompson across the room and made her way over, grateful for a friendly face. "I'm so glad you came," Grace said, her wide smile brimming with genuine warmth. "We need all the supportive voices we can get tonight. I heard that some major donors might pledge to expand after-school literacy programs if all goes well." Evelyn forced a small smile. "That's the hope." Before she could say more, movement near the entrance caught her eye. Noah had arrived, wearing a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly. He scanned the crowd until his gaze landed on Evelyn. She tried not to shrink under his intense stare, feeling a twist of old emotions: love, anger, hurt, churn in her chest. Grace took in the scene with a gentle frown. "If you want to slip away or avoid him, I can cover for you." Evelyn shook her head. "I'll manage. We're both here for the same cause." After a moment's hesitation, she approached Noah. His expression was careful, uncertain. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. She answered with a curt nod, steeling her nerves. "Let's stay focused on why we're here. The dinner is about raising funds for the city's schools, right?" He swallowed, dipping his head. "Right." The evening progressed in a flurry of polite introductions and brief speeches from local officials. Evelyn delivered a heartfelt talk about the importance of literacy, her voice unwavering even as she sensed Noah watching from the edge of the crowd. She highlighted her students' improvements and the upcoming reading program partnership with Grace's non-profit. Applause washed over her when she finished, and she felt a surge of pride. This was the real work, the part of her life that was honest and good. Eventually, dinner was served. Tables were arranged in perfect rows, each adorned with floral centerpieces. Evelyn found herself seated with Grace, some corporate donors, and a board member from the philanthropic organization. Across the table, Noah listened attentively to the conversation, occasionally interjecting with remarks about bridging financial gaps in public education. The tension between him and Evelyn simmered beneath the surface, invisible to most. Midway through the entree, an older businessman, Mr. Randolph, turned to Evelyn. "I hear you and Mr. Pierce make quite the team. He's always spoken so highly of your dedication as a teacher." Evelyn tensed. She forced a polite smile, wanting to correct him, to say their team was fractured, that he had shattered her trust. But professional decorum prevailed. "Thank you," she replied softly, noticing Noah's eyes flicker with remorse. After the meal, an auction commenced, featuring rare art pieces and exclusive experiences. Proceeds were slated to support library refurbishments across inner-city schools. Evelyn felt a stirring sense of hope as bids soared. If enough funds were raised, it could transform countless children's lives. That truth alone kept her going, even as her emotions swirled dangerously each time she caught sight of Noah. Finally, near the end of the event, a hush fell over the room as the master of ceremonies called for final pledges. Noah stepped forward with a microphone, unexpectedly announcing a significant donation from Pierce Holdings to support the reading program. A sum that far exceeded anything Evelyn had anticipated. A wave of gasps and applause followed. She stared at him, shocked. "I've always believed in the power of education," Noah said, his voice resonant in the hushed ballroom. His eyes flickered toward Evelyn. "And I've learned that trust and truth are paramount in every relationship, personal or public. Without them, even the greatest resources go to waste. I hope this pledge helps remind us what really matters, giving children a chance to learn." Though the audience erupted in cheers, Evelyn's heart pounded with conflict. She knew this was more than a charity gesture. It was an olive branch, a public declaration that he wanted to repair the damage he'd done. Yet, part of her wondered if the gesture made a difference, or if it was simply another move in the grand game he'd started. Standing on the periphery of applause, Evelyn felt the heat of her anger and sorrow mingling with cautious admiration for his generosity. His eyes sought hers in the crowd, and for an instant they locked gazes, a silent question passing between them. Is this enough to start healing, or have we reached the point of no return? The morning after the benefit, Evelyn woke to a surge of conflicting emotions. On one hand, she couldn't dismiss how significant Noah's donation was, enough to bolster the reading program for years. On the other hand, bitterness simmered. She wrestled with the notion that his grand philanthropic gesture didn't erase the lie he'd woven around her life. Deciding she needed physical activity to clear her head, she opted for a brisk walk through Riverside Park. The winter air had a crisp edge that stung her cheeks, and slender trees stood bare against the cloudy sky. While she walked, she replayed the moment Noah had stepped up to the microphone to announce his pledge. The sincerity in his voice had been undeniable, but was he performing again, she wondered. Eventually, she sat on a bench overlooking the Hudson River, letting the cool breeze tussle her hair. She thought back to the day she sold her car, how determined she'd been to stand by Noah. Had that been real devotion on my part or naive trust? The past weeks felt like a lifetime, each day layered with new hurt and fragile hopes. When she finally stood to leave, she checked her phone, a missed call from Noah, plus a text asking if she had time to talk. Instead of replying, she tucked the phone away and made her way to the nearest subway station. She owed it to herself to speak with someone who had no personal stake in the drama. Grace, she thought. She respected Grace's moral clarity and knew she'd offer honest feedback. Later that afternoon, she found Grace at the community center, unloading donated books from a delivery van. Evelyn quickly jumped in to help. Once the boxes were carried inside, Grace brushed off her hands and offered a warm smile. "You're a sight for sore eyes. How are you holding up after last night's event?" Evelyn let out a slow breath. Grateful for the donations, but overwhelmed. Noah's big pledge. "I don't even know how to feel about it." Grace tilted her head sympathetically. "You mean, with everything going on between you two?" Evelyn nodded, deciding to fill her in on the broad strokes. How Noah had lied about being broke, how he'd done so to test her loyalty, and how much it hurt to realize he never truly trusted her. Grace listened intently, her expression solemn. When Evelyn finished, Grace placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "I'm so sorry you're going through this. People do desperate things when they're afraid of getting hurt. It doesn't excuse it, but it explains the mindset." Evelyn's eyes welled slightly. "I keep swinging between wanting to forgive him and wanting to walk away. The idea of rebuilding trust after such a lie, it seems impossible." Grace nodded thoughtfully. "Trust is like a vase. Once broken, even if you glue it back, it's never quite the same. But that doesn't mean it can't still be valuable, just different," she shrugged. "The real question is, do you still love him enough to work through this? And does he love you enough to truly change? Only you can answer that." Tears gathered in Evelyn's eyes. "I want to see him change, but how do I know if it's real? He's still the same person who orchestrated that entire fake downfall." Grace sighed, handing Evelyn a tissue. "You'll have to watch his actions going forward. Consistency over time. Words are easy, but transformation shows up in the day-to-day choices. They parted with hugs, and Evelyn walked home feeling a bit lighter. She reminded herself that the donation from Noah, while grand, was only one gesture. If he truly wanted her trust, he would need to show humility and honesty in every interaction, not just in public. That night, instead of avoiding him entirely, Evelyn decided to call. She listened to the phone ring, a knot of nerves in her stomach. Finally, his familiar voice answered. "Evelyn?" He sounded almost breathless. "Yeah, it's me. I want you to know I appreciate the donation you made last night. It'll help so many kids. But that doesn't fix what happened between us." His sigh was audible. "I know. I didn't do it just to impress you. I've always been passionate about supporting education. But I realize it might look like I'm just trying to buy back your trust." They spoke cautiously, dancing around raw wounds. Noah expressed regret, again, and offered to meet on neutral ground, perhaps a counselor's office, if that would help them communicate honestly. Evelyn hesitated, remembering Grace's words. Watch for consistent actions, not mere promises. "I can't give you an answer tonight," she told him, "but I'll think about it." When she hung up, she felt as if she'd run a marathon. The day's conversations clung to her mind. She found a crumb of hope in the fact that they could still speak civilly, but she also recognized the long road ahead. Was she emotionally prepared for it? She didn't know. The only certainty was that her life had irrevocably changed, and her heart would need time and tangible proof before she could even consider letting Noah back in fully. The next couple of weeks played out in a slow dance of cautious steps. Evelyn and Noah texted occasionally, swapping logistical updates related to the reading program's funding and Noah's ongoing philanthropic efforts. She saw small glimmers of a different side to him, one more open, less secretive. But their conversations about personal matters remained polite and measured, as though they feared shattering the fragile peace. During this period, Evelyn threw herself into preparing the expanded reading initiative. Thanks to Noah's pledge, plus additional donations from other benefactors, the school received a shipment of new books, e-readers, and language software. Evelyn worked overtime, staying after school to organize materials. The bright-eyed faces of her students, especially those who had struggled most, fueled her sense of purpose. Rebecca occasionally stayed to help, noticing the shift in Evelyn's demeanor. "I'm glad to see you smiling more," she remarked one late afternoon, stacking a row of books onto a shelf. "Things must be improving." Evelyn paused to consider. "In some ways, yes, I'm still hurt, but I'm not as consumed by anger. Time and the progress here at school, it's helping me heal, I think." Rebecca patted her shoulder. "That's good. Just make sure you're not burying your feelings under piles of children's books. If you want to talk about Noah, I'm here." Evelyn gave a small nod, offering a grateful half-smile. "I appreciate it. Right now, I'm letting his actions speak. He's promised to be transparent, and so far, he's been true to his word." Outside of school, Noah made efforts to show he wasn't hiding anymore. He sent Evelyn detailed spreadsheets of his real finances, no illusions, no hidden offshore accounts. He expressed willingness to attend couples therapy if she decided that was a route they should explore. He even confided that he was meeting regularly with Oliver, not to orchestrate more schemes, but to untangle any lingering deceptions he had spun in the corporate realm. One evening, as Evelyn graded papers in her cozy living room, she received a call from Grace. "We're hosting a small gathering at the community center this Saturday," Grace said, "a volunteer appreciation event, and we'll also introduce the new reading resources to the neighborhood. I'd love for you to come and bring Noah if you're comfortable with that." Evelyn's stomach flipped. The idea of Noah in a casual community setting felt both comforting and nerve-wracking. But she realized it might be a chance to observe him interacting with others, continuing to prove his sincerity. "I'll ask him," she replied. When Noah agreed without hesitation, Evelyn felt a spark of relief. He sounded almost eager. "I'd be happy to. Just tell me what time to show up, and I'll be there." Saturday arrived with a chilly wind rattling the bare branches outside the community center. Inside, however, the atmosphere was warm, folding tables lined with homemade treats, stacks of donated supplies, and bright posters celebrating educational milestones. Volunteers and local families mingled, sharing stories and aspirations for the kids. Evelyn arrived early, carrying an armful of reading materials to distribute. Grace greeted her with a quick hug. A few minutes later, Noah appeared at the entrance, wearing a simple sweater and dark jeans, nothing like the tailored suits he used to don at upscale events. Evelyn felt a jolt. It was a subtle sign that he might be letting go of the polished facade. He approached her with a shy smile. "Hi," he said, voice low. She tilted her head, returning the greeting. "Glad you made it." They spent the afternoon chatting with parents, explaining how the new reading program would operate and guiding children to activity stations. At one point, Noah knelt beside a little boy struggling to read a picture book. Softly, Noah helped him sound out the words. Evelyn watched from a distance, her heart twinging. His patience and genuine kindness seemed real, not staged for applause or cameras. Grace noticed too, leaning toward Evelyn with a quiet comment. "He's good with kids." Evelyn nodded, recalling how she first admired Noah's philanthropic heart. Slowly, she felt a flicker of the old affection that once bound them. Was it enough to counter the pain? As the gathering wound down, the buzz of cheerful voices and children's laughter began to fade. Evelyn found Noah at a table, helping pack leftover supplies. She took a breath, approaching him. "Thank you for coming," she said. "The kids appreciate the attention, and so do I." He straightened, a humble warmth in his eyes. "I'm glad I could be here. I want to keep showing you I'm serious about changing." Her chest tightened. She believed he was trying, but she still felt the sting of betrayal. "I can see you're making an effort," she replied carefully. "It means a lot, but I won't pretend it fixes everything overnight." He acknowledged her words with a slow nod. "I understand. I'll keep proving it." They locked eyes, the air between them charged with unspoken hope and lingering hurt. In that moment, Evelyn glimpsed the possibility that love could evolve, even after such a betrayal, if both parties were willing to face the wreckage and rebuild with honesty. But the process was far from over, and a subtle, nagging worry whispered that the greatest challenge was yet to come. The next few weeks were a delicate balancing act. Evelyn and Noah saw each other occasionally, short meetings or casual volunteer events. Each time, she found herself scrutinizing his words, his body language, searching for any sign of duplicity. Noah, in turn, appeared unusually transparent, quick to answer any question, willing to show her receipts or schedules if it quelled her lingering doubts. Though the tension between them remained, Evelyn admitted to herself that her anger had begun to thaw. She liked seeing him interact with her school community, forging genuine connections. She allowed herself to hope they might find a cautious, new equilibrium, if only she could trust that he'd never resort to lies again. As winter prepared to yield to spring, an invitation arrived from a local philanthropic council. They were hosting a formal banquet specifically to honor individuals who had made substantial contributions to public education. Evelyn had been nominated for her dedication in launching the reading program. Noah's name was also on the roster, recognized as a key donor for sustaining it. Reading the invitation's fine print, Evelyn's heartbeat quickened. This event, scheduled for 3 weeks hence, was shaping up to be even more public than the previous benefit. Rumor had it that significant city officials, possibly even the mayor, might attend. In some ways, it was the perfect platform to spotlight the reading program's success, but it also stirred echoes of vulnerability. She would be standing next to Noah under bright lights, perhaps fielding questions about their partnership, professional and personal alike. One late afternoon, as she organized her classroom, Evelyn called Noah. She heard the familiar tension in his greeting. "Hey, Evelyn," she forced a light tone. "We got another invite to the City Education Council banquet. They want to recognize us for the reading program." His pause was almost imperceptible. "I see. Are you comfortable going with me? Together?" She pressed a hand to her forehead. She knew that was the question looming between them. Could they present a united front when their relationship was still on unsteady ground? "I think so," she said slowly, "at least from a professional standpoint. We both played a role, and it's good for the program if we show solidarity." "And personally?" Noah asked, voice tinged with hesitance. She inhaled. "I guess we'll figure that out. But this is too important for the kids and the community to let our issues overshadow it." He exhaled, sounding relieved. "Agreed. Thank you, Evelyn. We'll make it about them." Despite her calm response, Evelyn's mind swirled after the call. She replayed their conversation, wishing it felt more like the easy banter they once shared. But perhaps a professional alliance was the best they could manage for now. Over the following days, she found solace in small victories at school. Several students who had once lagged in reading now showed remarkable progress, beaming as they devoured chapter books. Evelyn documented these successes, hoping to present them at the banquet as evidence of the program's impact. Yet, at the back of her mind, she sensed that bigger emotional challenges lay ahead. She and Noah might appear together at this high-profile event, but unless they confronted their remaining wounds, the glossy surface might crack. A hint of premonition arrived when Oliver McCarthy reached out to Evelyn again, asking for a quick meeting. Reluctantly, she agreed, meeting him at a quiet coffee shop near her school. As they settled at a corner table, Oliver looked unusually somber. "I know you and Noah have been rebuilding," he began. "I respect that. But I have to warn you, there's still some fallout from his initial deception. Certain board members or acquaintances might hint at unsavory rumors if they catch wind that the ruined millionaire fiasco was staged." Evelyn stiffened. "I hadn't even considered that side of things. Are you saying people will discover the truth of his stunt?" Oliver nodded, sipping his coffee. "Noah has tried to keep it private, but secrets rarely stay hidden in these circles. There's a chance someone might bring it up at the upcoming banquet or in the press." A cold knot settled in her stomach. "Wonderful," she said bitterly. "So we could be blindsided on stage or in front of cameras with a confrontation about his lie." Oliver winced. "I can't guarantee it, but it's possible. I wanted you to be aware." After a heavy silence, Evelyn spoke quietly. "Thank you for telling me. I'll handle it if it comes up. I just wish we could catch a break. The program is doing genuine good. It'd be a shame if scandal overshadowed it." "Agreed," Oliver said softly. "If it helps, I'm doing what I can behind the scenes to keep rumors at bay, but these philanthropic circles thrive on gossip." When Oliver left, Evelyn lingered, stirring her untouched latte, grappling with the weight of potential public embarrassment. What if the event turned into a spectacle exposing Noah's lie? She hated the thought that her proudest accomplishment, helping children learn, might be tainted by scandal. Returning to her apartment, she wrestled with the frustration of it all. Noah's elaborate test, their tenuous truce, the looming possibility of public scrutiny. She needed to decide how to react if confronted. Should she defend Noah, reveal the truth, remain silent? Throughout the evening, she drafted mental scripts. In each, she vacillated between protective loyalty, what if she still wanted to preserve their relationship, and righteous anger, feeling he deserved consequences for his actions. Eventually, fatigue set in. She realized no script could prepare her for every scenario. She had to rely on her own moral compass in the moment, trusting her better judgment. Deep down, Evelyn sensed that this upcoming banquet would be more than an award ceremony. It was shaping up to be a crucible. There, under the spotlight, they might face the ultimate test of whether trust and love could truly be salvaged, or whether they were doomed to crumble under the weight of past deceptions. The evening of the City Education Council banquet arrived with a chilling rain that slicked Manhattan's streets. Evelyn hurried inside the venue, carefully sidestepping puddles and tucking her coat under her arm. She felt the prick of nerves, though she pressed them down, reminding herself she was here for the children, the reading program that had blossomed under her and Noah's combined efforts. The banquet hall was resplendent, glittering chandeliers reflecting off marble floors. Large displays showcased success stories from various educational projects, including a panel devoted to Evelyn's reading initiative. Photographs showed her students laughing, reading, and thriving, a testament to how far they'd come. Before she could take it all in, a hand gently touched her shoulder. Turning, she saw Noah, dressed in a tailored suit but absent the confident swagger he once carried. His posture was more tentative, like he was wary of stepping into her space uninvited. "You look lovely," he said, searching her face for permission to be warm. She inhaled, bracing herself. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well, too." They stood awkwardly for a moment as people bustled around them. Finally, Noah asked, "Shall we find our table?" She nodded, letting him guide her to a reserved spot near the stage. The buzz of conversation grew as more attendees filtered in: teachers, philanthropists, city officials. A few recognized Evelyn and Noah, congratulating them on their contributions. Each time someone complimented the reading program, Evelyn felt a spark of pride overshadow the tension, yet a tight coil of anxiety knotted in her chest, wondering if or when someone might publicly challenge Noah's earlier deception. Speeches began, each speaker highlighting different educational milestones. Applause rose intermittently, polite and encouraging. As the evening progressed, they reached the segment featuring teacher-led initiatives, shining a spotlight on exemplary projects that had made a tangible difference. Evelyn's name was called. Her pulse raced. Standing at the podium under the bright glare of stage lights, she glanced out at the sea of faces, some supportive, some merely curious. She spoke about the success of her reading program, carefully crediting not just her own efforts, but also Grace Thompson's NGO, the volunteers, and yes, Noah Pierce's philanthropic pledge. "I never imagined we'd see such rapid improvement among our students," she concluded, voice steady. "But with the right resources and dedicated people, children can accomplish extraordinary things." Thunderous applause filled the hall, stirring her confidence. As she stepped down, Noah rose from their table, meeting her halfway in the aisle. He offered a tentative smile before moving to take the stage himself. He spoke of the financial boost provided to various schools, acknowledging the importance of consistent funding. Evelyn watched him carefully, half expecting him to falter or appear disingenuous, but his tone was earnest. He praised Evelyn's commitment, referencing her unwavering devotion to her students. Yet, just as he neared the end of his remarks, an older gentleman in the audience stood up abruptly. Evelyn recognized him as a board member from a rival philanthropic group, Mr. Swinton, a known gossip. "Mr. Pierce," Swinton called out in a cool, sharp tone, "you speak of unwavering support, but how can we be certain of your sincerity, given the rumors about your, shall we say, fabricated financial troubles?" A hush descended on the banquet hall. Heads turned, eyes darting between Noah and the man who had called him out. Evelyn's heart pounded. Here it is, the confrontation Oliver warned me about. Noah gripped the edges of the podium. For a split second, his composure wavered. Then he drew a measured breath. "Yes," he began, voice subdued but firm, "I'm aware that rumors have circulated, claiming I pretended to be financially ruined. The truth is that I did indeed manufacture a crisis in my personal life, foolishly so, out of fear and mistrust. It wasn't related to the company's finances, but my own insecurities." A ripple of shock coursed through the crowd. Some gasped softly, others exchanged whispers. Evelyn's stomach churned, witnessing Noah lay out his shame so publicly. He continued, "I won't stand here and pretend it was anything but a grave mistake. I allowed personal demons and past betrayals to drive me to test someone I love. I regret that deeply, but I also stand by my support of education because that has always been genuine. This cause isn't a facade or a whim. It's a responsibility I take seriously." Silence stretched, thick with tension. Mr. Swinton pursed his lips, seemingly taken aback that Noah had confessed so openly. Across the room, Grace met Evelyn's gaze with a subtle nod of encouragement. Determined not to remain silent, Evelyn stood from her seat. Her legs felt heavy, but she forced herself to speak. "This reading program has changed countless young lives," she said, projecting her voice clearly. "Regardless of personal mistakes, the impact remains real. The children who can now read at or above grade level aren't living in rumor. They're living in actual growth and opportunities." A rumble of agreement passed through the crowd. Noah's eyes flicked to Evelyn, relief and gratitude flickering across his face. While Mr. Swinton looked dissatisfied, the broader audience seemed moved. Applause erupted, not the polite kind, but a genuine display of support for the educational strides made. The tension broke, replaced by respect for the real work accomplished. Returning to her chair, Evelyn's heart still pounded. She wondered if she'd done the right thing, defending a man who had hurt her so deeply. Yet she couldn't stand by while the program was tarnished by personal vendettas. Noah concluded his speech with a subdued thanks, then stepped down, shoulders weighted with the vulnerability he'd just displayed. As the ceremony continued, the room's energy shifted back towards celebration. But Evelyn knew that for her and Noah, this night was more than an awards banquet. It was their ultimate trial, forcing them to confront the lie head-on, in front of people who might judge them harshly. Yet, in that crucible, something unexpected had emerged, an honest admission and a glimpse of mutual respect. Whether it would be enough to rebuild their relationship was still unclear, but at least neither was hiding in the shadows anymore. In the days following the City Education Council banquet, Evelyn felt like she was stepping gingerly across a bridge, suspended over a deep gorge. On one side lay the hurt and mistrust born from Noah's deception. On the other, the possibility of a future richer in honesty and compassion. After he publicly admitted his wrongdoing at the banquet, she witnessed something remarkable, a man willing to shed the armor of pride and fear. Yet the question remained, was this enough for her to fully forgive and rebuild their broken bond? At school, her days carried on with the same familiar rhythm, lesson planning, guiding students through reading exercises, overseeing the newly expanded after-school program. Each night, however, she confronted the same quiet ache. If she was honest, she missed the comfort of talking with Noah without walls between them. The old patterns of affection, the inside jokes, his effortless way of making her feel protected, those memories tugged at her. Still, she hesitated. Rebecca, noticing Evelyn's pensive mood, cornered her in the faculty lounge one afternoon. "You've been quieter than usual," she observed, pouring coffee into a paper cup. "Are you avoiding your own feelings again?" Evelyn exhaled, running a hand over her forehead. "Maybe. I just don't know what I want anymore." He showed remorse, publicly no less. "The reading program is thriving, in part because of him. We talk more openly now than ever before, but every time I let my guard down, I remember how easily he manipulated me." Rebecca nodded. "Trusting someone after they've lied is never easy. Have you considered professional help, therapy, maybe even couples counseling if you're open to it?" Evelyn sipped her coffee, grimacing at its bitterness. "We discussed it briefly. He's willing. I'm just not sure I have the energy. I'm barely coping with everything else, my work, the expanded program, the possibility of more events." Her friend laid a hand on her shoulder. "Only you know if it's worth fighting for. If it is, therapy might help you heal faster. If not, you have the right to walk away. No shame in that." That night, as Evelyn sorted through a pile of essays, she mulled over Rebecca's words. A knock on her apartment door startled her. When she peered through the peephole, she found Noah standing in the hallway, looking somewhat uncertain. Her heart lurched. "We haven't planned this." Opening the door a crack, she braced herself. "Noah, did we schedule a meeting?" He shook his head. "No, I'm sorry for showing up without warning, but I needed to see you in person. If this is a bad time, just say so." She glanced over her shoulder at the stack of grading. "Actually, I could use a break." "Come in." He stepped inside, Pepper the cat weaving around his ankles. He offered a gentle scratch behind her ears before following Evelyn into the small living room. His eyes scanned the familiar space, the well-worn couch, the bookshelves crammed with teaching manuals, the lamp that cast a warm glow over the tidy area. This was home, Evelyn realized, and once he was nearly part of it. He took a seat, rubbing his hands together nervously. "I wanted to follow up on the idea of therapy or a counselor. I know it might feel like one more burden on your schedule, but if there's any chance we can repair things, I'm ready to do the work." Evelyn noticed the earnestness in his gaze. It made her chest constrict. "He's trying. It's not a simple decision, Noah. I'm scared," she admitted, "of getting too close again, only to be hurt." His shoulders slumped. "I understand. But I promise, I won't hide anymore. If you need to see every bank statement, every email, anything, I'll show you. I realize trust isn't rebuilt overnight, but I'm asking for a chance." Silence settled between them, broken only by the soft purring of Pepper. After a long moment, Evelyn nodded. "Okay," she said quietly, "we can try counseling, but no promises. This is just a step." Relief washed over Noah's features. "Thank you. I'll look into options and forward you the details. We can find someone neutral." They spent the next half hour talking in hushed tones, addressing small concerns rather than diving headfirst into old resentments. He mentioned a property he planned to downsize into, no longer the palatial penthouse, but a more modest condo with enough room for an office. She spoke about the next set of reading assessments at school, how excited the kids were to have new books. Strangely, it felt like an ordinary conversation between two people forging a fresh bond, one marked by caution, yes, but also by genuine care. When he finally left, Evelyn stood by the door, feeling a spark of tentative hope. She had no illusions that this resolved everything, but as she turned off the lights, she couldn't ignore the flicker of possibility. Maybe they could emerge from the darkness, rebuilding something new and perhaps stronger than before. A few weeks later, Evelyn and Noah found themselves outside a discreet brownstone near Central Park, where an engraved brass plaque read, Dr. Marjorie Ellis, Couples and Individual Counseling. The day was surprisingly warm for early spring, a hint of blooming tulips and fresh grass in the air. Evelyn glanced at Noah, her heart thudding. I can't believe we're doing this. Feels surreal. He gave a wry smile. I know, but I'm glad you agreed to come. They stepped into the cozy waiting room, filled with soft armchairs and tasteful artwork. Dr. Ellis, a warm-faced woman in her 50s, emerged to greet them. She led them to her office, which featured a large window overlooking a leafy courtyard. Settling on a plush couch, Evelyn noted how the space felt both professional and welcoming, exactly what they needed. Thank you for seeing us, Noah said, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. Dr. Ellis nodded with an encouraging smile. Let's begin by understanding what brings you here. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Evelyn found her voice. We're engaged, or we were engaged. He lied about a major aspect of his life to test my loyalty. It shattered my trust. We're here to see if we can fix that. Noah cleared his throat. I orchestrated a fake financial collapse because I feared being used. I've been hurt before. But I realize that's no excuse for what I did. Dr. Ellis's brow furrowed thoughtfully. I appreciate both of you for stating it plainly. This is a significant betrayal. Evelyn, how do you feel, sitting here next to him? Evelyn paused, struggling to articulate the swirl of emotions. Conflicted. Part of me is still furious and deeply hurt. Another part recognizes that he's making sincere efforts now, like admitting everything in public and seeking help. With gentle prompts, Dr. Ellis guided them through an exploration of their individual fears. Noah's terror of exploitation, Evelyn's dread of being lied to or undervalued. The session uncovered how both had felt vulnerable for different reasons. Noah, due to past relationships that revolved around money. Evelyn, due to previous betrayals in her life and her desire to be genuinely seen for who she was. Dr. Ellis wrapped up the session with clear-eyed pragmatism. Rebuilding trust is a long process, she said, her voice gentle yet firm. You'll have to make daily choices to show honesty, empathy, and forgiveness. But you also need to decide if you want to recommit to this relationship knowing it's been damaged. They scheduled a follow-up appointment for the following week. Outside, as they walked, Evelyn breathed in the fresh air. How do you feel about this? She asked, glancing up at Noah. He looked thoughtful, hands in his pockets. Exposed, but also hopeful. It's good to have someone like Dr. Ellis guide us instead of trying to fix it all alone. Evelyn nodded, a sense of cautious optimism fluttering inside her. They strolled through the edge of Central Park, passing joggers and families pushing strollers. A light breeze stirred the budding leaves overhead. With each step, she contemplated the difference between who they had been before the lie and who they were becoming now. Were they forging a deeper connection, or merely patching holes in a sinking ship? After they parted ways at a subway entrance, Noah to an evening meeting, Evelyn back to her apartment, she reflected on how familiar yet unfamiliar this path felt. Before the deception, she would have called him, joked about how therapy made them share their deepest secrets. Now, she mulled everything internally, feeling both the comfort of his willingness and the weight of the past. That night, curled up with Pepper on the couch, she reviewed the day's events. The therapy session had illuminated deeper truths than she expected, their matching insecurities, their longing to trust. And ironically, she realized that visiting Dr. Ellis's office, being vulnerable with Noah in front of a kind but firm mediator, had given her a sense of progress. We're not ignoring the elephant in the room anymore, she thought, rubbing Pepper's silky fur. We're actively trying to address it. Despite her lingering doubts, that deliberate choice felt like a win. Evelyn closed her eyes, conjuring a small spark of gratitude. As complicated as it was, she was relieved they were finally facing their problems with honesty. She didn't know where it would lead, if they'd rekindle the spark or decide to part ways on respectful terms. But at least they were doing the hard work side by side, stepping onto familiar emotional terrain with new eyes and just maybe deeper wisdom. As the weeks slipped by, Evelyn noticed changes in both her and Noah. Their second and third counseling sessions continued peeling back layers of misunderstandings. For Evelyn, a big hurdle was learning to voice her hesitations before they became resentments. For Noah, it was resisting the urge to hide his fears, especially about finances and emotional vulnerability. Outside therapy, they found small ways to reconnect. One Sunday, they volunteered together at a local library, helping kids pick out free books. Their interactions were tinged with the cautious tenderness of two people rediscovering each other. When a young girl shyly asked Noah for help selecting a story, he knelt down and patiently pointed out titles, reminding Evelyn of his natural warmth. At school, Evelyn's colleagues, especially Rebecca, sensed a shift. "You seem more at peace," Rebecca observed during a lunch break. "I mean, not that everything's magically fixed, but you're lighter somehow." Evelyn shrugged, a soft smile on her face. "It's a work in progress. Therapy's not easy. Sometimes I leave feeling drained, but it's forcing us to communicate openly, and that's something we never fully did before. We avoided conflict until it snowballed into this big lie." Rebecca nodded approvingly. "Sounds healthy. I'm happy for you, no matter how it turns out." Meanwhile, the reading program continued to flourish. Grace Thompson's organization funneled more volunteers into Evelyn's school, launching a mentorship project for older students who struggled with literacy. Several children made remarkable progress, and local press began to take notice. Teachers' program boosts inner-city reading rates. Read one headline in a neighborhood newspaper. In the midst of these developments, Noah approached Evelyn with an idea. "How would you feel about me hosting a small get-together for the volunteers and the kids who've shown the most improvement? Maybe at my new condo?" he asked, sounding slightly uncertain. "I want to celebrate what we've accomplished, and I'd like to open my home as a gesture that I'm not hiding anymore." Evelyn paused, the memory of his old penthouse fiasco hovering at the edges of her mind, but the sincerity in his tone touched her. "That's generous. I think the kids would love seeing a new environment, and it'd be a nice way to recognize the mentors." He grinned, relief evident. "I'll keep it simple. Just snacks, games, maybe a short reading session. I want it to be about them, not me." A few days later, the condo gathering came to life. Gone was the grand, upscale air of his old penthouse. Instead, the condo was warm and functional. Wooden floors, a comfortable living area, a modest but modern kitchen. As volunteers, parents, and a handful of students filed in, Noah welcomed them with genuine warmth. Evelyn arrived a bit early, helping him arrange an assortment of snacks on the countertop. She noticed how calm he seemed, no trace of the anxious tension she once associated with his need to project wealth. "You really like this place, don't you?" she asked quietly, picking up a tray of fruit. He nodded. "It feels more like a home than a showpiece. I'm happier here than I ever was in the penthouse." She smiled softly, a hint of shared understanding passing between them. Throughout the afternoon, they read stories together with the children, who sprawled on the living room rug, giggling at funny passages. Some older students proudly demonstrated their improved reading skills, earning enthusiastic applause. Snacks were devoured, laughter filled the space. Grace even popped by for a quick visit, beaming at the welcoming atmosphere. "This is wonderful," she whispered to Evelyn at one point. "You two make a solid team when you're on the same page." Evelyn's heart warmed. For the first time in ages, she felt the old sense of partnership with Noah, except now it wasn't built on illusions or hidden fears. It was straightforward. Two people joined in a mission to help kids read, forging a more sincere connection along the way. When the gathering wound down, the children and volunteers trickled out, thanking Noah for his hospitality. He insisted on handing each child a small bookmark with their name on it, a thoughtful touch that made them grin from ear to ear. As the door closed after the last guest, Evelyn leaned against the wall, exhaustion mingling with quiet joy. "That was nice," she said, voice edged with wonder. "It's been so long since I've seen you this relaxed." Noah exhaled, a content smile ghosting his lips. "I feel like I can finally breathe again. Hiding made me anxious every moment. Now, even with all the work and therapy ahead, I'm more at peace." Evelyn nodded, feeling a flicker of something she'd lost, deep affection. They hadn't fully settled the question of marriage or set a new wedding date. But for the first time, she imagined that their next steps, whatever they might be, could be taken together, rooted in honesty, shaped by the hardships they had overcome. And that thought, fragile though it was, felt like the beginning of something worth nurturing. Spring gradually unfurled its bright banners across Manhattan, softening the winter's harsh edges. Trees along the streets burst into pale green leaves, and flowers sprouted in window boxes. This changing season seemed to mirror the shifts in Evelyn's heart, hope blossoming where once only distrust and anger had lived. She and Noah continued attending counseling sessions. Some days were easier than others. At times, old wounds cracked open and Evelyn would snap, "How can I be sure you're not lying again?" He would quietly acknowledge her fears, reassure her that transparency was his new standard, and they would remind each other that rebuilding trust was a daily choice. About 2 months after they'd started therapy, Dr. Ellis gently guided them to reflect on the future. "You came here with an engagement on shaky ground. Where do you both stand today?" Noah looked at Evelyn, his eyes reflecting both tenderness and respect. "I think we're on firmer ground, but I'm letting Evelyn lead on this. I hurt her deeply, and I won't push." Dr. Ellis turned to Evelyn. "And you? What do you envision?" She hesitated, her cheeks warming. "I see a possibility. I see him becoming the partner I always wanted. Honest, kind, and committed, but I'm still cautious. It's not like flipping a switch." Dr. Ellis nodded, her calm gaze unwavering. "Caution is natural, Evelyn, but I sense genuine progress. Don't underestimate what you've accomplished here." Stepping out into the mild sunshine after that session, Evelyn took Noah's hand, something she hadn't done spontaneously since discovering his lie. He glanced at their entwined fingers, a tentative smile lighting his face. They strolled to a nearby park, finding a bench under a blooming cherry tree. Evelyn inhaled the sweet scent of blossoms, letting herself savor the moment. "I think," she began softly, "I'm ready to talk about a future together. Really together, not as two people tiptoeing around each other's fears." Noah's expression flickered with joy and relief. "I'd love that. Whatever pace you need, we'll do it. No rush, no pressure, just honesty." And so they talked. About the next year, about marriage, about how they wanted to handle finances moving forward. Evelyn insisted on clarity, shared accounts for certain expenses, personal accounts for others, no secrets. Noah agreed. They spoke of possibly living together in his condo eventually, but only when she felt fully comfortable. The conversation was marked by a new openness, each question met with genuine answers, each fear addressed rather than brushed aside. Their personal progress ran parallel to a triumphant time for Evelyn's reading program. The district recognized the significant improvement in literacy rates, and local media spotlighted the project's success. More donors offered funding, and Grace Thompson's non-profit planned to replicate the program in other neighborhoods. Evelyn was thrilled, her dedication validated. One balmy Friday evening, as the sun set over the city skyline, Noah invited Evelyn to dinner at a small rooftop restaurant near Lincoln Center. The location was intimate. Tiny tables, fairy lights twinkling overhead. They talked animatedly about school expansions, philanthropic collaborations, and upcoming summer activities for the students. Partway through the meal, Noah paused, reaching across the table to gently take Evelyn's hand. "I know we agreed, no pressure," he said, his tone humble, "but there's something I want to ask, or rather, to re-ask, under new terms." Her heart fluttered. "Go on." From his suit pocket, he produced a small velvet box. It wasn't flashy or oversized like before. It was modest, understated. Opening it revealed a simple ring with a single sapphire set in a band of white gold. The gem glistened under the glow of lantern light. "No illusions this time," Noah said, voice trembling just a bit. "No hidden agendas. I love you, Evelyn. I've learned so much about trust, about letting go of fear. Will you marry me, not because of my wealth or any show, but because we've grown into a partnership that stands on honesty?" Tears pricked Evelyn's eyes. She felt the weight of every mistake, every heartbreak, every step toward reconciliation. Looking at him now, she saw not the guarded millionaire, but a man humble enough to admit his flaws and work through them, someone who valued her beyond what she could provide. Yes," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "On those terms, I'll marry you." He slid the ring onto her finger, then exhaled, his shoulders sagging with relief. They pressed their foreheads together, sharing a moment of tender silence broken only by the distant hum of traffic far below. In the weeks that followed, they announced their renewed engagement discreetly. No fancy parties, no ostentatious displays. Close friends, like Rebecca and Grace, offered heartfelt congratulations, fully aware of the tumult that had led here. Evelyn's parents, initially hesitant, came around after seeing how Noah had changed. On a bright morning late in spring, they exchanged vows in a small ceremony at a community garden in Manhattan. Only a handful of guests stood among the blooming flowers: Rebecca, Grace, a few family members, Oliver, and some friends from the school. The ceremony was simple, heartfelt, and marked by tears of relief and joy. Evelyn wore a classic ivory dress, her hair adorned with delicate wild flowers, while Noah stood in a tailored suit, his eyes reflecting both gratitude and devotion. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, applause rang out softly among the greenery. Evelyn felt tears slip free, though she was smiling so broadly her cheeks hurt. Her mind swam with memories, painful moments of betrayal, then the slow, honest work of rebuilding. In that instant, she realized the journey had shaped them into stronger, more compassionate partners. Later, amid laughter and toasts, Noah pulled her close, whispering, "Thank you for giving us another chance." She pressed her cheek to his. "Thank you for proving I made the right choice." And so began their new horizon, not a fairy tale of instant perfection, but a genuine marriage founded on the hard-won lessons of vulnerability, integrity, and forgiveness. In a world where money often obscured the heart's truest intentions, they had found a path to love's deeper truth, one story at a time, one day at a time, together. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.